Chapter 1348. The last test is loyalty. As long as you don't have evil intentions towards true martial temple, you won't be eliminated. The woman in black said slowly with a cold expression. There are too many people who have evil intentions towards true martial temple. The outer palace disciple sighed. This time, tens of thousands of people had successfully crossed the bridge. Their hearts were extremely strong. However, they failed at the last test. This was because they weren't loyal to the true martial temple, and they even harbored ill intentions. In fact, how many disciples who hadn't become true martial temple's disciples would be loyal? Those who passed just didn't have evil intentions. Although Murong didn't have evil intentions, he didn't really want to become a disciple of true martial temple. He just wanted to get the various resources of true martial temple. He didn't have any sense of belonging to true martial temple. However, Murong didn't know the end of the bridge and crossed it with one step. He stopped. After taking a step forward, Murong stopped in his tracks. This pause made the people who were already paying attention to him cast their gazes on him. I wonder if he will be eliminated? It's best if he is eliminated. Some of the people who crossed the bridge said sourly. Some of them had even taken several days to successfully cross the bridge. Murong, on the other hand, had taken less than a quarter of an hour. The difference between them was simply too great. If Murong was given enough time, he might become an imperishable realm expert and become an outer palace disciple of true martial temple. It was normal for them to be jealous. Senior Sister Zhongli, do you think he can pass? The talkative outer palace disciple said to the woman in black again. The black-clothed woman's unchanging ice-cold expression also changed a little at this moment. To be precise, there was a trace of spirit in her eyes. She was no longer as cold as before. However, she didn't say anything and just shook her head. No matter how monstrous Murong's talent was, as long as he had evil intentions towards true martial temple, he wouldn't pass. True martial temple wouldn't accept such a disciple to harm themselves. And did Murong have any ill intentions towards the true martial temple? However, they had no way of knowing. At this moment, after Murong took a step forward, a strong and dangerous aura tore through the void and quickly descended from a distance. At this moment, all the hair on Murong's body stood on end. Murong's first thought was to retreat. But after a short while, he came to his senses. This was the true martial temple, so the huge power that descended shouldn't be trying to kill him. Because he didn't reveal any abnormalities after he came up. Be it the Hichu Luoshu, the chaotic celestial body, the soul sanctification, or the law of time, there was no indication of any of them. It was impossible for those people to discover his secret. Murong guessed that this incomparably huge force should be the final test that the true martial temple's super experts had for them to pass the heavenly bridge. Although he didn't know what they wanted to see, Murong still focused and held his breath, dispelling the distracting thoughts in his mind. He maintained a clear mind and imagined all kinds of admiration he had for the true martial temple. After doing all this, the huge but invisible force descended and instantly enveloped Murong. But soon, the divine sense disappeared without a trace. At the same time, Murong's body was pushed down by an invisible force, causing him to fall off the bridge. He had successfully passed. Murong's face lit up with pleasant surprise. If he didn't show any joy after passing the heavenly bridge, then he would really be different. Moreover, he was pleasantly surprised that he didn't just pass the heavenly bridge. He was pleasantly surprised that the owner of the powerful divine sense hadn't discovered anything strange about him. The formation character formula of the 9 syllables could not only read people's minds, but also protect Murong's mind to the greatest extent. Even an ancestor sage, or even a primal chaos ancestor sage, wouldn't be able to easily read his mind. On the other hand, Murong was extremely sensitive to all of this. It was just like the enormous divine will that had appeared just now. Even if the others were completely seen through, they didn't discover that divine sense. However, Murong was able to easily discover it. He actually passed. While Murong's face was filled with joy, A portion of the people who had crossed the bridge before him had unpleasant expressions on their faces. Jealousy. Glancing at those people, Murong nodded slightly at some of them who looked at him with friendly expressions, then found a random corner and sat down cross-legged. As for those who looked like he owed them money, Murong couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. The true martial temple was so big, and there were so many odd job disciples. After leaving the main hall, there probably wouldn't be any interactions. Let them be jealous. Moreover, there was no competitive relationship between odd job disciples. As long as one reached the imperishable realm, one could become an outer hall disciple. Those who were jealous of Murong were destined to have no great achievements. At this time, more people had entered the main hall, but there weren't many who were still struggling on the heavenly bridge. Most of them were eliminated from the first illusion. Others were swept off one after another. Not many people were able to persist until the last stage. After a day, there were no more disciples entering the main hall. At this time, Fan Jian had also reached the last stage. He only paused for a moment before successfully passing. I finally passed the heavenly bridge. I finally became an odd job disciple of the true martial temple. The moment he fell off the heavenly bridge, Fan Jian couldn't help but roar excitedly. In this regard, the outer hall disciples and those who had passed the heavenly bridge earlier didn't have any strange reactions, because most of them had the same reaction when they passed the heavenly bridge. Brother, did you see it? I finally passed and became an odd job disciple of the true martial temple. Fan Jian came in front of Murong, unable to control himself. Murong rolled his eyes. This is only the first stage. If you can't break through to the imperishable realm after 100,000 years, won't you still be swept out? If you want to be excited, wait until you become an outer hall disciple. Fan Jian's excited expression instantly froze. Then he speechlessly looked at Murong. I say, brother, can't you say something nice? Don't you feel excited? Or are you confident that you can break through to the imperishable realm within 100,000 years? While Fan Jian was speaking, the tens of thousands of people around him had ugly expressions on their faces, because they all felt that in the end, they might be swept out of the true martial temple. Only a few people were full of confidence. Presumably, they were full of confidence in themselves. Just him? Break through to the imperishable realm in 100,000 years. He's simply overestimating himself. Before Murong could speak, a sarcastic voice was heard. The tone was sour and full of jealousy. Fan Jian frowned slightly. He turned to look at the middle-aged man who spoke and sneered. You think everyone is like you? You're so old and only in the 7th level of the undead realm. If I were you, I would have gone home long ago. Otherwise, I would be swept out of the true martial temple and lose face. You. The middle-aged man flew into a rage. Fan Jian's words were clearly mocking him. In a holy world, it was basically impossible to tell a person's age from their appearance. Although the middle-aged man looked middle-aged, everyone present was older than him. Moreover, after reaching the undead realm, age was no longer a problem. You what? Don't think that I'm afraid of you just because you're big. Do you believe that I won't beat you to death? The middle-aged man only said one word before he was blocked by Fan Jian. You're courting death. The middle-aged man finally couldn't help but roar. His figure flashed, and he already took a step forward, appearing in front of Fan Jian. A fist smashed towards Fan Jian fiercely. Fan Jian's eyes flashed with a touch of coldness, and he also punched out. Boom! After a dull bang, Fan Jian's figure staggered, and his whole body was immediately pushed back. On the other hand, the middle-aged man's figure only swayed slightly. Then he rushed forward and punched Fan Jian again. Murong narrowed his eyes slightly. Fan Jian was only in the rank 6 realm, but his strength could cross a small realm to battle. If the middle-aged man was an ordinary person, then Fan Jian might defeat the middle-aged man. But the middle-aged man's strength was powerful, estimated to have the battle strength of crossing a small realm. Therefore, there was still a gap of small realm between them. Fan Jian wouldn't be defeated in a short time, but the one who would be defeated in the end would definitely be Fan Jian. Die for me. The middle-aged man roared furiously and already charged in front of Fan Jian, charging forward again. Fan Jian naturally wasn't to be outdone and fought with the middle-aged man. And the others all retreated far away, except for Murong Yu. Each and every one of them watched the two fight with a cold expression. Just treat it as watching a show. Senior sister Zhongli, should we go and stop them? An outer hall disciple asked. The black-clothed woman shook her head. Therefore, those few outer hall disciples didn't go and stop them. Sure enough, just as Murong Yu had guessed, it didn't take long for Fan Jian to be suppressed. It wouldn't be long before Fan Jian was defeated. At this time, Murong Yu finally stood up slowly. Step by step, he walked toward the two of them. Both of you, please stop, Murong Yu said indifferently when he came to the two of them. Get lost. The middle-aged man had long found Murong Yu an eyesore. When he saw Murong Yu coming over to stop the fight, he immediately shouted. With a flip of his big hand, he slapped Murong Yu. There's a gap of 4 small realms between the two of them. Murong Yu will be defeated in one move. The onlookers all shook their heads, but soon the expressions on their faces froze. They saw Murong Yu slowly reach out his right hand. Then in a flash, he grabbed the middle-aged man's big hand halfway. Chapter 1349. At this moment, the middle-aged man felt as if his hand was clamped by a huge red-hot iron pincer. He could not move at all despite the burning pain. The middle-aged man was shocked. With a thought, a huge amount of power surged into the big hand and shook towards Murong Yu's hand. However, as soon as his power came into contact with Murong Yu's hand, it disappeared without a trace like a clay ox entering the sea. The big hand still did not move. There wasn't even the slightest change in Murong Yu's expression. The middle-aged man's shock was no small matter. Feeling humiliated and enraged, he roared and punched the air with his other hand, aiming for Murong Yu's head. Murong Yu's brows furrowed slightly as he grabbed the middle-aged man's hand. Suddenly, the middle-aged man felt as if he had been hit by a huge holy mountain. He could not help but retreat. At the same time, his whole body seemed to be about to collapse. What's going on? This scene happened too quickly. It was not until the middle-aged man was sent flying that everyone reacted. However, after they reacted, they were all shocked. There was a difference of 4 minor realms between the two of them, but Murong Yu was able to easily suppress a rank 7 undying realm expert. Was a middle-aged man just an embroidered pillow, good to look at but useless? However, he could force Fan Jian, a rank 6 undead stage expert, to be unable to fight back. Therefore, everyone came to a conclusion. It was not that the middle-aged man was too useless, but that Murong Yu was too strong. Fighting across 4 small realms? This person is definitely a genius. While the odd-job disciples looked at Murong Yu, the outer disciples of the true martial temple who presided over the assessment also looked over. All of them were surprised. Feeling everyone's gaze, Murong Yu snickered secretly. This time, he didn't just help Fan Jian out of his predicament. There was a deeper meaning behind his actions. The true martial temple was one of the most powerful cultivation holy lands of a human clan in the holy world. Legend had it that there were supreme existences. They had extremely terrifying cultivation resources. However, there were many disciples in the true martial temple. Everyone who could become a disciple of the true martial temple was a genius. Ordinary geniuses were just ordinary goods in the true martial temple and could only become ordinary disciples. However, the true martial sacred hall had a terrifying amount of cultivation resources. However, there was no need to use all of it on ordinary disciples. No matter where it was, there was no such thing as fairness. In the true martial temple, the holy sons, holy daughters, chief disciples, and other such existences obtained many times more cultivation resources from the temple than ordinary disciples. Therefore, if he wanted to obtain more cultivation resources, he had to become a genius among geniuses, an outstanding disciple among the countless disciples of the true martial temple. Murong Yu's main purpose in coming to the true martial temple was to obtain the resources of the true martial temple. However, if he was just an ordinary disciple, then he would only receive the most basic cultivation resources, which would be useless to him. Therefore, he had to express himself to a certain extent and make himself the center of attention. But don't go overboard. If he showed that he could kill an enemy 2 realms above him, he would be able to do so. Then it would not be as simple as attracting the attention of others. He would be asking for trouble. Perhaps those super powerhouses would not do anything to him. However, those inner hall disciples of the true martial temple, especially those holy sons and holy daughters, would definitely treat him as a thorn in their side and directly remove him. No one was willing to see a genius rise up and then compete with them to share a portion of their benefits. In the end, they would even be eliminated. Muronyu had seen too many of such things. Now that he revealed that he could fight across 4 realms, he was not too monstrous. He could only be considered a genius among geniuses. Although it was eye-catching, it would not cause some people to be afraid. Little bastard, you're courting death. Seeing everyone's mocking and disdainful gazes, the middle-aged man was immediately enraged. With a loud roar, he took a step forward and crossed the boundless space to appear in front of Muronyu. He stretched out his hand and grabbed at Murongyu's head, intending to crush it. We're all odd job disciples and can be said to be from the same sect. We should help each other. Why do we have to kill each other? Why are we in such a hurry to kill each other? Muronyu did not attack and just took a step back. However, the middle-aged man, who was angry out of humiliation, chased after Muronyu. His big hand transformed into thousands of claw shadows that shrouded Muronyu and strangled him. Muronyu took 2 more steps back, but the middle-aged man kept pressing forward. His desire to kill Muronyu was extremely strong. Finally, Muronyu counterattacked. 1 punch. With just 1 punch, the middle-aged man was sent flying. This punch did not contain much power from Muronyu. If he had attacked with all his strength, not to mention a 7th-rank undead realm expert, even a low-rank profound sage would have been blown apart by his punch. Even so, the middle-aged man spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. Even the earth trembled for a moment. What powerful strength! This man's strength is comparable to an 8th-rank undead realm expert, but he was defeated with 1 punch. Doesn't that mean that he's comparable to a peak undead realm expert? Everyone looked at Muronyu with shocked eyes. It's possible that he can even defeat a 1st-rank undead realm expert. Someone asserted, even if his strength is comparable to a peak undead realm expert, defeating an undead realm sage is tantamount to a pipe dream. How can the gap between the undead realm and the undead realm be so easy to cross? An undead realm expert against an undead realm expert is like an undead realm expert against a sage. He can easily crush us, a 9th-rank undead realm sage said with a gloomy face. However, when everyone heard his words, why did they feel that they were directed at Muronyu? Moreover, the disdain in his words was extremely strong. A 7th-rank undead realm expert was defeated by a 3rd-rank undead realm sage with 1 punch. What a waste. In the end, the 9th-rank undead realm sage looked at the middle-aged man lying on the ground with disdain. Feeling the hostility in the other party's eyes, Muronyu looked at him indifferently. He saw that this person was one of the people who had the worst expression after he successfully crossed the bridge. Muronyu narrowed his eyes slightly. This guy was obviously jealous of him. If he guessed correctly, this guy would definitely come back to make trouble for him in the future. Should I beat him up? This thought suddenly flashed through Muronyu's mind. However, he quickly rejected it. Defeating the middle-aged man today was enough. Therefore, he just smiled faintly and walked to Fan Jian's side. Brother, you're too awesome. You can easily kill a 7th-rank undead realm expert with just a 3rd-rank undead realm expert. I'm so impressed. Fan Jian gave Muronyu a thumbs up. However, as he spoke, he recalled seeing Muronyu just now and couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. He's not dead. Muronyu pointed at the middle-aged man lying on the ground pretending to be dead and said somewhat speechlessly. Although he had defeated the middle-aged man, he didn't want to kill him. He's not dead yet. He's probably pretending to be dead. Fan Jian looked at the middle-aged man with a face full of surprise, and his tone was full of sarcasm. Everyone's eyes gathered on the middle-aged man again. The middle-aged man was ashamed and angry, and his hatred for Murong Yu grew stronger. However, he was too embarrassed to stand up, so he simply lay on the ground and pretended to be dead. Okay, you've all successfully passed the test. Congratulations on becoming a servant disciple. I hope that in the next 100,000 years, you can all successfully advance to become an outer hall disciple. Junior brothers, take them to go through the formalities. The black-clothed woman walked over, encouraged everyone, and then floated away. In addition to the dozens of people who came after Fanjian, there were about 60,000 people who passed the test. There was still a considerable distance to 100,000 people. However, the true martial temple had always been a cultivation holy land. They would rather not accept enough people than accept too many. After all, the true martial temple never lacked disciples. Servant disciples can only move around the outermost area of the true martial temple. You must never enter the outer hall disciple area. That's a forbidden area for servant disciples. If you violate it, you will be warned. In serious cases, you will be expelled from the true martial temple. After Murong Yu and the others left the test hall, they flew to the back. On the way, the few outer hall disciples introduced Murong Yu and the others in detail. Especially Murong Yu, the few outer hall disciples were extremely enthusiastic. Thinking about it, with Murong Yu's aptitude, he would have a chance to become an outer hall disciple soon. He might even surpass them soon. Although they were outer hall disciples, they were only ordinary disciples. Naturally, they had to curry favor with some powerhouses who might rise in the future. Anyway, they didn't need any capital to curry favor with them. At this time, they only needed to express goodwill to Murong Yu. In the future, Murong Yu would naturally have a better impression of them. Providing help in a time of need was always more impressive than adding flowers to a brocade. At this moment, Murong Yu finally realized where the mountain ranges and buildings he'd seen before were. They weren't within the range of activity of the odd job disciples. It was not the real, true martial temple. Servant disciples like them did not have the qualifications to come into contact with the outer hall, inner hall, and other places. This was the demeanor of a cultivation holy land. The few outer palace disciples led Murong Yu and the others to collect their identity tokens and their residences. Then, they gave a brief introduction to the structure of the sect before leaving. Murong Yu's house was on Yangwu Peak. It was an independent courtyard. Yangwu Peak was one of the countless mountain peaks outside the true martial temple. A portion of the servant disciples usually lived here and on the nearby mountain peaks. According to the introduction, the inner hall, outer hall, and preparatory hall servant disciples of the true martial temple had the same structure. They all had complete departments, such as the merit hall that issued missions, the book collection hall that stored cultivation manuals, and so on. The preparatory hall had all the departments of the inner hall. Of course, even if they had the same name, the things inside were completely different. They couldn't be compared at all. Chapter 1350. There were various secret places in the true martial temple. These secret places were either suitable for cultivation or had various treasures of heaven and earth. However, to enter these secret places, the most basic requirement was to be an outer hall disciple. Moreover, there were not many secret places that outer hall disciples could enter. As for the servant disciples, they were not qualified to enter the secret places at all. Apart from receiving a certain amount of resources from the true martial temple every month, the servant disciples could only obtain resources by completing missions. The merit hall was such a place. There were various missions in the merit hall. You can accept missions there, and as long as you complete the mission, you will receive merit. Merit was equivalent to contribution points and points. One could exchange for various treasures and even cultivation methods in the true martial temple. In addition to accepting missions in the merit hall, one could also issue missions. However, issuing missions required a certain amount of merit. Based on the current situation, I can only complete missions in the merit hall if I want to obtain resources. However, I wonder how many merit points I need to exchange for a supreme-grade holy weapon? Murong Yu pondered and flew in the direction of the merit hall. In the preparation hall area of the true martial temple, where was the busiest? It had to be the merit hall. The achievement hall was an incomparably large and majestic palace. Before Murong Yu even got close, he already saw people coming and going in front of the merit hall. When he entered the hall of merit, he realized that the huge hall was filled with people. It was as if the entire hall was filled with people. After looking left and right, Murong Yu walked in with large strides. Soon after, he came to the counter at the back of the hall. Near the counter, there were a few huge flat surfaces hanging on the wall. Missions were constantly flashing on them. Repairing a low-grade holy weapon, 50 merit points. Seeking a blood-red grass, 200 merit points. Refining 1,000 revolving water dragon pill, 150 merit points. There were many missions on the screen. Some were for repairing holy weapons, while others were for refining holy weapons. Some were for seeking various treasures of heaven and earth. Murong Yu only took a glance, and the missions on the screen had already scrolled a few times. Therefore, Murong Yu used his divine thought to check it out. Then he was really shocked. There were at least hundreds of thousands of unfinished quests on the screen. Other than this screen, there were 2 other screens. In other words, there were at least 2 million incomplete missions in the achievement hall. This was also because there were people accepting and completing missions at every moment. However, although there were many missions, the merit points obtained after completing them were not much. There were not even a few missions that exceeded 1,000 merit points. This made Murong Yu somewhat hesitant. These missions gave him so little merit points. How much would he have to do to exchange for a top-grade saint artifact? Moreover, none of these missions seemed to be something that Murong Yu was good at. Repair a saint artifact? Refining pills? After thinking about it, Murong Yu aimed at these 2 big boards. Concocting pills required all kinds of medicinal herbs and cultivation. However, for those who needed to refine medicine, they had already prepared the ingredients and only needed to refine the medicine. However, the prescription was a problem. Murong Yu himself did not know how to refine pills, but as long as he had the prescription, the yin-yang cauldron could refine these pills. There wouldn't be any problems. As for refining weapons, Murong Yu had never tried refining weapons. However, refining weapons was not difficult, but it was not easy either. The most basic condition of refining weapons was to fuse all kinds of materials and refine the basic appearance of a magic weapon. For Murong Yu, who had the flame of primal chaos, no one was more suitable than him to do this. However, a weapon refined in this way could not even be considered saint artifact. If one wanted to make a weapon a real saint artifact, they would need to inject all kinds of attack formations into the weapon. The more formations there were, the higher the grade of the saint artifact. For example, an ordinary low-grade saint artifact only had a few hundred formations. The more powerful ones had more than 900 formations, but it would not exceed 1,000 formations. Because after more than 1,000 formations, it would be a middle-grade saint artifact. A middle-grade saint artifact needed at least 1,000 formations. However, a saint artifact with 1,000 formations could only be considered as trash among middle-grade saint artifacts. A top-grade mid-grade saint artifact could even have up to 4,999 formations. Of course, refining weapons was not so simple. It was not the more formations, the higher the grade of the saint artifact. Every formation had to complement each other and be continuous, setting off each other in a pleasing contrast. Simply put, every formation had to work at the same time. Only then could it be considered a saint artifact. Otherwise, even if millions of formations were sealed in a saint artifact, if they could not complement each other, that saint artifact would not have any power at all. It might even explode and shatter because of the conflict between the formations. Alchemists and weapon refiners are very popular in the holy world. If I can become a master-level existence, true martial temple will definitely focus on nurturing me. Murong Yu pondered. One had to know that weapon refiners could even refine ancestral artifacts and primal chaos ancestral artifacts. Of course, To become a real ancestral artifact, or primal chaos ancestral artifact, it had to be nurtured by the ancestor sage or primal chaos ancestral artifact with their own power. And alchemists were even more popular than weapon refiners. After all, whether it was cultivation or battle, even if the saints had reached the immortal realm, but there would still be many hidden injuries, hidden diseases, and so on. Being immortal only meant that they had an endless lifespan. It did not mean that they could not die. In the holy world, the number of people who died every day due to various hidden injuries and hidden diseases was as numerous as the sand in the Ganges River. If I can refine pills myself, then I can combine them with the power of life. Then I, as a divine doctor, will once again shine brilliantly. If I can treat some terminal illnesses, then resources will come in an endless stream. When thinking of this, Morong Yu could not help but light up. Thus, Morong Yu began to accept missions to repair saint artifacts and refine pills. One had to know that although he had never refined weapons or medicine before, but with Hichu around, these were not a problem. After all, some of the chaotic celestial bodies before Morong Yu were weapon refining grandmasters, while others were alchemy grandmasters. Hichu Luo Shu was only influenced by what he saw and heard. He knew too much. With Morong Yu's aptitude, he only needed a casual guidance from Hichu, and he would benefit immensely. The reason why he did not refine weapons or pills in the past, that was because Morong Yu did not have the time. But now, the holy world was the final stage. He did not need to work as hard as before. It was also time to slowly enjoy all of this. Moreover, this was the only thing he could do now. Otherwise, his strength would not improve so quickly. Morong Yu walked up to the counter and handed over his identity token. At the same time, he said to the white-clothed woman behind the counter, "Senior sister, please help me take number 100, 599, 13800. The white-clothed woman was mostly good-looking. She could be considered a beauty. However, her expression was cold, as if everyone owed her money and refused to pay her back. When she heard Morong Yu speak, she could not help but look at Morong Yu. But soon, a disdainful sneer appeared at the corner of her mouth. "Junior brother, don't you know the rules? A new handyman disciple can only take a maximum of 10 missions at a time. Moreover, repair a middle-grade sacred artifact and refine a middle-grade sacred pill. Can you do it with your third-order undead realm strength?" The white-clothed woman was an undead realm powerhouse. She should be an outer hall disciple who worked here to earn merit. She seemed to be asking Morong Yu, but everyone could hear the ridicule and disdain contained in her words. Whoosh! Suddenly, countless people's eyes penetrated Morong Yu's face. Morong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. He did not even know how he had offended this woman. Could it be menopause? But for the mission, and he would have to deal with this woman in the future. He did not get angry and just said lightly, "I don't know about this. In that case, help me take the first 10 missions. Just now, Morong Yu had signed up for 50 missions in one breath. That's right, junior brother. Those missions have a time limit. You've accepted 10 missions. Not only do you need to refine pills, but you also need to repair sacred artifacts. Do you really have enough time?" At this time, a man in the crowd kindly reminded Morong Yu. "Thank you for the reminder, senior brother. But since I dare to take it, I naturally have confidence," Morong Yu said lightly. Only 2 of the 10 missions were to repair sacred artifacts. The other 8 were all to refine pills. And those pills were the pill formulas that Hichu knew, so there was no pressure to refine them. As for the 2 missions to repair sacred artifacts, one was a low-grade sacred artifact, and the other was a middle-grade sacred artifact. Morong Yu only used them as practice. Even if he could not succeed, Hichu could still remedy it. "Are you sure it's these 10 missions?" The disdain on the white-clothed woman's face became stronger. She had seen many hotheads. Every time, there were new handyman disciples who did this. But in the end, they all ended up miserable. And she really did not believe that Morong Yu was an all-rounder. Was he a blacksmith and an alchemist in one? There were such people in the holy world, but they were unable to specialize. In the end, he would achieve nothing, no great achievements. Morong Yu was too lazy to speak and just nodded. But the white-clothed woman still looked at him and did not accept the mission for him. Murong was a little annoyed. He had already said so much, but she still wanted to make things difficult for him. Junior brother, to accept these missions, you need to pay a deposit. The tasks you've accepted cost at least 10 million mid-rank Saint Crystals, right? The man who reminded Murong before saw Murong's silly look and could only remind him again. Murong suddenly smiled embarrassedly. So it was like this. So, he took out a storage ring from Hichu Luoshu. There were 10 million mid-rank Saint Crystals in it. This was also the amount of Saint Crystals he had obtained after raiding Blood Rain Mountain's treasury. Otherwise, he would not have been able to accept these 10 missions. Chapter 1351. If you are unable to complete the mission within the time limit, your Saint Crystals will be confiscated as compensation to the person who issued the mission. At the same time, your merit points will be deducted. You have 0 merit points now. If you are unable to complete the mission, your merit points will become negative. Are you sure you want to accept these 10 missions? The white-clothed woman looked at Murong and confirmed again. However, the mocking look on her face became more and more intense. She was obviously looking down on others. In fact, this was the case. These odd job disciples were still odd job disciples. Every time, out of 100,000 people, how many could become an official disciple? As an official outsider, she had reason to look down on these odd job disciples. If not for the fact that she could earn merit points by working here, she would not even be willing to take half a step into the preparatory hall. A swan could not stay with a toad. That would be called depravity. Other than the white-clothed woman, many of the surrounding disciples also looked at Murong with mocking eyes. Other than the disciple who had kindly reminded him, the others looked at him with disdain and looked like they were watching a show. Yes, I'll accept it, Murong said indifferently. As the saying goes, villains are difficult to deal with. He was too lazy to bother with these villains. Since they looked down on him, he would use facts to give them a slap in the face. The white-clothed woman sneered and took Murong's identity token. She swiped it across a crystal on the counter. Immediately, Murong saw his identity medallion flicker with light. Then he found that his identity token was like the huge screens in the Hall of Merit. A few missions appeared. Obviously, the missions on the screen had been transferred to Murong's identity token. After swiping the card, a few women came out with a bunch of things. 2 damaged Saint artifacts and some medicinal herbs for refining pills. Murong took them and turned to leave. 10 missions, repairing Saint artifacts and refining pills. Is this kid also a weapon refiner and alchemist? Looking at Murong, everyone discussed. Every profession has its own specialization. Even if he is both a refiner and a refiner, he won't have any great achievements. Haha, I'd like to see how those brats are going to hand in the mission when the time comes. Maybe he can refine it, someone said weakly. Idiot, do you think it's that easy to repair a Saint artifact? That middle-grade Saint artifact only gave him 15 days. The other missions would take at most half a month. Is it possible to complete 10 missions in half a month? Perhaps he is a genius among geniuses and has the confidence to complete the 10 missions in half a month. I think he's more like an idiot among idiots. Someone sneered. Everyone was laughing at Murong. Only the man who had warned Murong just shook his head. Obviously, he was not optimistic about Murong. However, since Murong was stubborn, he could not continue to stop him. Since Murong wanted to throw his life away, then so be it. After returning to Yangwu Peak, Murong did not see Fanjian. He should have gone to familiarize himself with the surrounding environment. After entering his house and activating the array, Murong entered the Hichu Luoshu world. Hichu, start refining pills. After handing all the medicinal herbs to Hichu Luoshu, Murong took out the 2 damaged Saint artifacts. Refining pills, as long as there was the Yin-Yang Cauldron, the formula, and enough heaven and earth yuan qi, there would not be any problems. Murong had never refined pills before, so he could only hand them over to Hichu. I think you could try refining pills if you have time. Otherwise, on certain occasions, if you don't immediately refine pills, you will be suspected. Hichu took the medicinal herbs and did not immediately refine pills. Instead, he said so. Morongyu nodded. All right, but let's take a look at these two saint artifacts first. If there is enough time, then I will refine pills. As he spoke, he had already picked up the low-grade saint artifact. His enormous spiritual force immediately permeated it. However, his expression soon turned gloomy. This damaged low-grade saint artifact had no power at all. It was no different from an ordinary weapon. This was because Morongyu found that more than half of the hundreds of array formations that were originally engraved inside had been broken. In principle, a saint artifact that was damaged to this extent could be eliminated. However, it might be because the person who issued the mission was relatively poor and could not afford other low-grade saint artifacts, or because this saint artifact was very important to him, so he wanted to repair it. If it was an ordinary blacksmith, he would definitely not repair this saint artifact. The cost of repairing this saint artifact was greater than refining a new low-grade saint artifact. However, Morongyu did not care. After all, it was used for practice. This saint artifact has about 700 array formations. It can be considered a mid-grade, low-grade saint artifact. All the arrays engraved are offensive arrays. Murongyu's spiritual sense circled around the saint artifact. He already had a preliminary understanding of the arrays. Although he'd never refined an artifact before, his understanding of arrays had already reached the level of a grandmaster due to the influence of these people. What he lacked now was just hands-on experience. I just need to repair those damaged arrays and connect them with the previous ones. Then, this saint artifact can be considered repaired. Morongyu muttered to himself. He had already begun to repair those damaged arrays. Some of the arrays were only slightly damaged. Morongyu condensed streams of energy and sent them into the array formation, starting to repair it. It was different from setting up an array outside. In the past, when Morongyu had set up the Great Battle of the Lake and Mountain, he had needed a lot of materials, such as divine artifacts and magic treasures. These treasures were used as the foundation of the arrays. However, it was different to inscribe arrays in the saint artifact. These treasures were not needed as the foundation. He only needed to inscribe array patterns. When these array patterns were combined, they could also explode with great power. It could even surpass arrays that required various treasures as the foundation. Of course, this required the ability of the person who set up the arrays and their understanding of arrays. With Hichu's ability, he could casually use a few simple killing arrays to combine into a large array. That might cause some array experts to be badly battered. However, this kind of inscribing array patterns not only tested one's understanding of arrays, but also one's control of power. This was not bang. With great difficulty, Morongyu managed to replace the runes on the half-destroyed formation. However, just as he was about to fill in the last rune, the array formation exploded. If not for Murongyu's sharp eyes and quick hands, he would have sealed the void there immediately. Otherwise, it would have caused a chain reaction and caused the other arrays to explode. The result of that was very likely that the entire saint artifact would explode. Murongyu's spiritual force immediately withdrew from the low-grade saint artifact. Although he has rich theoretical knowledge, his practical ability is too weak. Morongyu muttered to himself. Using array patterns to set up arrays is different from ordinary arrays. Array patterns pay more attention to the compatibility, continuity, and stability of each other. Every array pattern has to be as normal as flowing water and not conflict with each other. Every array pattern is equivalent to the blood vessels in a human body, and the array is the entire person. If one blood vessel is not smooth with the other blood vessels, it will cause discomfort. A local lesion will cause the body to collapse in the end. My understanding of different array patterns is too shallow. Morongyu pondered for a moment and decided to practice first. Therefore, Hichu Luoshu began to burn the Chaos Saint Vein. There are not many Chaos Saint Veins left. However, before Morongyu left the Blood Rain Mountain, he entered the Chaos Secret Ground again and collected a large number of Chaos Saint Veins. Therefore, he did not have to worry about the Chaos Saint Vein now. After adjusting his state, Morongyu waved his hands. Array patterns constantly shot out from his hands and appeared in the open space in front of him. As the number of array patterns increased, the simplest killing array gradually took shape. Bang! It was still the last array pattern. Just as he added the last rune, the array formation directly exploded. Moronyu furrowed his brows slightly. The array formations in front of him were very smooth and coherent. However, when he added the last array pattern, it was a little stagnant. Bang! 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 Moronyu began to try. After failing more than 10 times, he finally succeeded in building a complete array. At this time, even he felt a little tired. It was mainly mental. However, the mind was closely related to the soul. With Muronyu's current immense soul power, the exhausted mind quickly recovered. After resting for a while and properly appreciating what he had just learned, Moronyu began to draw arrays again. As he drew more and more arrays, his technique became more and more skillful. In fact, towards the end, the formations he inscribed would no longer explode. Moreover, each array pattern became smoother and smoother, gradually becoming a real whole. Countless runes fused together perfectly to form a whole. This was a perfect array formation. However, Moronyu did not stop trying. This was because although he could draw a perfect individual array, refining a sacred weapon was not just enough to draw a sacred weapon. Moreover, multiple arrays had to be combined into one. An ordinary low-grade saint artifact would require 2 to 999 array formations to form. These arrays did not operate independently. Instead, they complemented each other and combined into a large whole. Each array was formed by countless array patterns, and the countless arrays in the sacred weapon were equivalent to the array patterns of an independent array. Then, they were combined to form a huge whole. Each array had to be combined with other arrays. There could not be any mistakes. Otherwise, the sacred weapon might shatter and be damaged easily. What Moronyu needed to do now was to combine the countless formations into a single entity, a grand formation, just like the formations outside the treasure vaults in the outside world. Each formation was linked to the next and complemented each other. It had the effect of pulling one hair and affecting the whole body. Most importantly, even if all the arrays were activated, they would not be damaged. Otherwise, if they were damaged after one activation, the sacred weapon would become scrap metal. Chapter 1352. Moronyu's talent was undoubtedly at the level of a monstrous genius. But even so, coupled with Hichu's knowledge of formations, it took Moronyu several days to completely master the inscription of the formation patterns and the coherence between the formations. In 5 days, Moronyu was already able to fuse 1,500 formations together perfectly. But it was impossible to add one more formation. Not only did this require talent, but also time and practice. To be able to perfectly integrate 1,500 formations in 5 days was already extremely monstrous. Otherwise, how could there be so few refining masters in the holy world? Not to mention the existence of great grandmasters. The number of formations in a middle-grade sacred tool is generally between 1,000 and 5,000. 1,500 formations were barely enough to refine a mid-grade saint artifact, but it can only be regarded as an ordinary middle-grade sacred tool. Moronyu thought to himself and stopped inscribing formations. Now that 5 days had passed, half a month's time was almost up, so he once again took out the low-grade sacred tool that needed to be repaired. After 5 days of inscription and cultivation, Moronyu was already familiar with these formations. In less than an hour, he had already repaired the damaged formations, and it only took him half a day to repair all the remaining formations. Buzz. The moment he repaired the collapsed formations, the low-grade sacred tool in his hand trembled violently and burst out with a dazzling light. At the same time, an incomparably huge force swept out, equivalent to the power of a mid-grade great saint. The janitor disciples of the true martial temple were at least in the undead realm. So why did they still need a low-grade sacred tool? Even if it was the best low-grade sacred tool, it could only display the strength of a first-stage Undead Realm powerhouse. What was the use of it? There were many reasons for this. The most important reason was naturally the value of the sacred tool itself. Even if it was a low-grade sacred tool, it was not something that everyone had. Not to mention the Undead Realm. Even a considerable number of Undead Realm and Profound Sage Realm powerhouses only had low-grade sacred tools. It was like a small knife in the hands of a 3-year-old child, unable to unleash the power of the knife at all. However, if the user was a strong man, then this small knife could become a lethal weapon. The perfect combination of his formidable strength and the sacred artifact would allow him to unleash an even greater power, even if that sacred artifact was of a relatively low level. When an Undying Saint used a low-grade sacred artifact, he could also use 10% or 20% of his strength. At the very least, it was slightly stronger than fighting with bare hands. The first mission is complete. Muronyu breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to put the sacred artifact aside, he frowned. These magic arrays. Muronyu frowned slightly. 700 magic arrays were engraved inside the sacred artifact. They had completely fused together, and there would not be any conflicts. If there were no external forces to destroy it, there would not be any problems with the sacred tool. However, no matter how Muronyu looked at it, he felt that these arrays were somewhat awkward. They looked very smooth, but they were somewhat uncoordinated. It was as if he had been running on a vast continent, but had suddenly entered a muddy path. These magic arrays are indeed not perfect. They can only be said to be barely fused together. Therefore, this sacred artifact can only be regarded as an ordinary item. It can't exert much power. If you can improve the position of the magic arrays, you should be able to increase the power of this sacred artifact by 10% or 20%. At this time, Hichu's voice came over. Murongyu's old face reddened. Just now, he had been complacent because he had successfully repaired this sacred artifact. However, Hichu had already seen that these magic arrays were uncoordinated, right? Therefore, Murongyu's divine sense began to check those magic arrays. However, although he felt that they were uncoordinated, he could not see it. After a long time, Murongyu's divine sense finally stopped on one of the magic arrays. This formation is like a huge rock in a small stream. It's lying here, blocking the advance of the stream. If we can move it to the side, we'll be able to move it. If it can be moved to the side, the stream will be unobstructed. Murongyu thought to himself. He began to carefully move the magic array to the side. Under his control, the movement of the magic array did not cause any chain reaction to the other magic arrays. Moreover, the 700 magic arrays seemed to be smoother and more coordinated. Just the movement of this magic array has increased the power of this low-grade sacred artifact by 10%. It can barely be considered a mid-upper grade sacred artifact. Murongyu is quite satisfied with his results. No, if I can add another magic array here, it will be even more coordinated. The power of this sacred artifact will be even greater. After looking at it for a while, Murongyu felt that the 700 magic arrays did not seem to be enough. There were still a few magic arrays missing. Thus, he began to add more magic arrays. However, what made Murongyu speechless was that it would have been fine if he had not added more magic arrays. After adding one more magic array, he saw even bigger loopholes. As a result, he added another magic array. However, as he added more and more magic arrays, there were more and more loopholes. In the end, when he looked at the 700 magic arrays again, he felt that they were full of loopholes. He could not bear to look at them directly. Fine, you've picked up a treasure. I'll help you perfect this sacred artifact. Murongyu shook his head and continued to add magic arrays. Now, Murongyu was like a master of art. He would not allow so many loopholes to appear in his work. He wanted to do everything he could to make that work the best it could be. At the very least, it was the best it could be at this stage. One day later, 999 magic arrays, the peak of low-grade sacred artifacts. If it were not for the fact that the material of this sacred artifact cannot support more magic arrays, it could be upgraded to a mid-grade sacred artifact. Looking at the long sword in his hand, Yu smiled. I finally know what it means to repair a sacred artifact is more difficult than to refine one. If I were to refine a new sacred artifact, it would not take a day. However, repairing a sacred artifact is not so easy. As he continued to add magic arrays, Yu made major changes to the hundreds of magic arrays in front of him. However, it was extremely difficult to make changes to magic arrays. This was because he had to consider the continuity and fusion of the magic arrays with other magic arrays. Now, the magic arrays in the sacred artifact in Yu's hand were completely different from before. Yu had made major changes to it. Its power was not just for show. Originally, it was at most a mid-grade sacred artifact. However, it was now a top-grade sacred artifact. If it were to unleash its full power, it would be comparable to a mid-grade sacred artifact. After throwing this perfect low-grade sacred artifact to the side, Yu sat down cross-legged and began to comprehend what he had learned when repairing the sacred artifact. One day later, he opened his eyes again. I should be able to draw 2,000 magic arrays now. Let's take a look at that mid-grade sacred artifact first. 1,500 magic arrays. If it was a day ago, I might only be able to barely repair them. But now, I can add another 500 magic arrays after repairing them. That's about a third of the sacred artifact's power. Yu smiled confidently. With a wave of his hands, he sent magic arrays into the sacred artifact. The number of magic arrays in the sacred artifact kept increasing. There were about 500 magic arrays, which was a third of the total number. However, it was much better than the low-grade sacred artifact. With Yu's increasingly skilled skills, it took him less than half a day to completely repair the sacred artifact. Now, let's see how many magic arrays I can add. After repairing the magic arrays, Yu did not stop. He began to add magic arrays to the sacred artifact. Time flew by, and another day passed. No more, no less. Exactly 2,000 magic arrays. The magic arrays of a mid-grade sacred artifact are between 1,000 and 5,000. 2,000 magic arrays can only be considered a low-grade sacred artifact. However, after being moved and strengthened by me, this medium-grade saint artifact should have the power of a medium-grade saint artifact with 2,500 formations. Yu is very satisfied with this result. After another day, Yu began to refine elixirs. However, there was not much time left before the 15-day deadline. With no other choice, Yu could only accelerate time. The reason why he dared to take on these 10 missions and even wanted to take on 50 missions before was because of this. In addition to relying on the Yin-Yang Cauldron, there was also the time acceleration function of the Hichu Luo Shu. With this cheating sacred artifact, not to mention the 15-day deadline, Yu even dared to take on 25 hours. However, it was too easy to be exposed. Yu would not be stupid enough to take on those people. Alchemy is about the distribution of the medicinal herbs, the control of the fire, and the control of the timing. Of course, alchemy also requires a good alchemy furnace. Hichu said in a deep voice. He took the Hichu Luo Shu and handed it to Yu. At the same time, he pointed out his alchemy experience directly into Yu's memory. In this way, it would be much easier for Yu to refine elixirs. The 1,000 revolving water dragon pill requires water dragon grass, white cloud spirit essence fruit. After digesting Hichu's alchemy experience, Yu took out the first mission, which was to refine the 1,000 revolving water dragon pill. The 1,000 revolving water dragon pill was only a low-grade sacred elixir. It was the best for Yu to practice. Logically speaking, low-grade sacred elixirs were everywhere. He only needed to use merit points to buy them. However, this kind of elixir was extremely rare and not many people refined it. If he wanted to buy it, he would need a lot of merit points. And this mission only required 150 merit points. 1,000 revolving water dragon pill can transform into a water dragon that lasts for 12 hours. This is a good thing to go to some hot areas. I wonder where these guys are going. While he pondered, Murong Yu had already divided the medicinal ingredients into several portions, ready to refine elixirs. Chapter 1353. The principle of refining a sacred pill was the same as refining a weapon. First, the various materials were distributed in a certain proportion. Then, they were refined into a liquid state. Finally, the various liquefied medicinal materials were fused together. However, this was not considered a pill. It had to be condensed into a pill to be considered a pill. Bang! After throwing a set of medicinal materials into the yin-yang cauldron, streaks of flame of primal chaos burned from his palm, covering the entire cauldron. The flame of primal chaos was said to be able to burn everything, but under Murong Yu's control, it did not have such great power. Instead, it erupted with an appropriate amount of power. Even so, there was still a dull bang in the yin-yang cauldron. After probing it with his divine sense, Murong Yu's face darkened. That set of medicinal materials had long disappeared without a trace. It had been burned to ashes. Murong Yu was quite speechless. The gap between theoretical knowledge and practical ability was too big. It was his first time refining pills, so he did not have enough control of the fire. Therefore, he directly burned that set of medicinal materials. If this continued, all the medicinal materials in Murong Yu's hands would be destroyed, and he would not be able to refine a single pill. With a thought, a large pile of medicinal materials appeared in front of him. These were all obtained in the past, and he had not discarded them. Now, he could only use them to practice. Bang, bang, bang. As the medicinal materials that were extremely precious to others were constantly burned, Murong Yu's control of the fire gradually became more skillful. From the beginning, he burned those medicinal materials as soon as he came into contact with them. Gradually, he began to melt those medicinal materials without burning them. In the end, Murong Yu's control of the fire was perfect. Whether it was the medicinal materials of the holy world or of the cultivation world, as long as he willed it, the flame of primal chaos would erupt and refine the medicinal materials. The control of the fire was only the foundation of refining pills. The fusion of various medicinal materials was the most difficult step. The medicinal strength of each medicinal material was different. It was fine if it did not clash with other medicinal materials. It could be slowly healed. However, some medicinal herbs were like water and fire, incompatible with other medicinal herbs. To perfectly fuse these medicinal herbs together and unleash a stronger medicinal efficacy, it was a great test of the alchemist's ability. Every single medicinal ingredient is equivalent to the runes in every single formation, just like the countless formations in a sacred artifact. Their medicinal efficacies need to be fused together in order to display their medicinal efficacies. Whether it's the pills of the cultivation world or the sacred pills of the holy world, they all have to be compatible with each other. The higher the compatibility, the stronger the medicinal effect. If there is a 100% compatibility, then the medicinal pill's ability will be extremely terrifying, far surpassing other similar medicinal pills. Inside the yin-yang cauldron, more than a dozen streams of liquid were suspended in the void. They were being manipulated by Murong Yu's spiritual consciousness. Murong Yu, on the other hand, was thinking about how to perfectly fuse them and even raise the compatibility to the highest level. The runes can perfectly fuse to form a formation, and every different formation can perfectly combine to form a large formation. These medicinal herbs are the same. Murong Yu thought in his heart as he began to move the dozens of streams of liquid. While moving them, his spiritual consciousness was raised to the extreme. He stared at each stream of liquid with full concentration, observing their changes. Perhaps it was because of his rich experience in refining weapons. Under his control, these liquids had completely fused together without any accidents. They turned into a large, irregular mass of liquid. Murong Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Although he was only refining a low-level spirit recovery pill, it raised his spiritual consciousness to the extreme. It was quite tiring. However, he did not relax. Instead, he continued. This was because he had reached the final step of refining the pill, condensing the pill. He separated the mass of liquid into several portions and then condensed it into the shape of a medicinal pill. Although this step was relatively simple, it was actually extremely difficult. If he was not careful, he would fail to condense the pill, and all his previous efforts would be wasted. However, Moronyu had a rich knowledge of alchemy, theoretical knowledge. Under his careful control, the spirit recovery pill was finally declared a success. A burst of medicinal pill fragrance spread out, covering the sky and the earth. Morongyu's heart moved, and 11 black medicinal pills appeared in his line of sight. However, when he saw the black medicinal pills, Morongyu's face darkened. Not to mention his success rate and the compatibility of the medicinal pills, just the appearance alone was not up to standard. 90% compatibility. Although the appearance is a bit unfair to the audience, the compatibility of the medicinal pills is not bad. To be able to achieve 90% compatibility on your first try is already considered a monstrous existence. Hichu only glanced at the few black medicinal pills, then said with a smile, "The appearance of the medicinal pills was not important. It did not matter even if they looked like shit. The most important thing was the medicinal effect. If there was 100% compatibility, then even if it was shit, there would be a lot of people buying it. 90% compatibility?" Morongyu's face suddenly revealed a smile. Whether it was in the cultivation world or the holy world, every medicinal pill had to reach 60% compatibility to be considered a qualified product. Medicinal pills with less than 60% compatibility could only be considered as trash. The higher the compatibility, the stronger the medicinal effect of the medicinal pill. However, the compatibility of various medicinal pills on the market was generally between 60 to 80%. Among the countless alchemists, those who could refine pills with more than 80% compatibility were relatively rare. Therefore, if a medicinal pill could reach 80% compatibility, then it was already considered a top-quality medicinal pill. To be able to refine a medicinal pill with 80% compatibility, then this alchemist could already be called Alchemy Grandmaster. Of course, after Grandmaster, there were still Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster, and so on. There were even titles like Pill God, Pill Saint, and so on. For a medicinal pill with 90% compatibility, Moronyu is already in existence at the level of Alchemy Great Grandmaster. If he could reach 95% compatibility, Moronyu would achieve the title of Pill Saint. As for Pill God, that was the title of the God realm. 80% compatibility is already Alchemy Great Grandmaster, and 85% compatibility is Alchemy Great Grandmaster. If I reach 90% compatibility, then wouldn't I become an Alchemy Great Grandmaster? Moronyu laughed. Hichu was immediately speechless. It's only your first time refining a medicinal pill with 90% compatibility. If you can refine a medicinal pill with 90% compatibility and have an 80% success rate, then you can become an Alchemy Great Grandmaster. Moronyu smiled indifferently and said, "I'm definitely going to be an Alchemy Great Grandmaster. Even if I can't refine, isn't there still the Yin-Yang Cauldron? The medicinal pill refined by the Yin-Yang Cauldron will definitely reach 95% compatibility, right? Hee, that's Pill Saint. Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster, Great Grandmaster, and Pill Saint. These titles were not based on how high the grade of the medicinal pill the alchemist could refine, but on the compatibility of the medicinal pill the alchemist could refine. If it was based on the level of medicinal pill refining, Moronyu's current strength was not even enough to be called a Grandmaster. After all, he was only in the undead stage. If he was asked to refine the level of the chaotic ancestor sage, he would not be able to refine it, let alone achieve compatibility. However, compatibility was even more difficult to improve than refining high-grade medicinal pills. In the holy world, there were definitely many people who could refine high-grade medicinal pills, but there were very few people who could become great grandmasters and great grandmasters. As for the Pill Saint who reached 95% compatibility, there was no such person at all. Perhaps Moronyu could reach that level in the future. Moronyu did not continue to be complacent. While joking, he had already begun to refine medicinal pills again. In the blink of an eye, several days had passed, and Muronyu had successfully refined medicinal pills hundreds of times. He had never failed in refining medicinal pills hundreds of times, and every time, the success rate was almost 100%. For example, if the same amount of medicinal herbs were given to other alchemy great-grandmasters and alchemy great-grandmasters, they could only refine 10 medicinal pills at most. Moreover, there would be waste pills. In other words, the average alchemy great-grandmaster could only refine 5 or 6 pills at most in a furnace. But Muronyu could refine more than 10 pills, because he had never produced a waste pill. The most terrifying thing was Murongyu's medicinal pill compatibility. The worst had reached 85%, and the highest had even reached 94% compatibility. As long as it was higher by 1/10, Muronyu would become a pill saint. On average, his medicinal pill compatibility had basically reached 90%, which was the level of alchemy great-grandmaster. Muronyu also wanted to reach the level of pill saint, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not improve the compatibility to 95%. According to Hichu's words, if it was really so easy to become a pill saint, then the world would be full of pill saints. However, Muronyu was not discouraged. Didn't he just come into contact with alchemy? If he started alchemy in the cultivation world, he might have reached the level of pill saint long ago. Moreover, it would not be a problem for him to reach 100% compatibility. I have a feeling that I can definitely refine a medicinal pill with a 95% compatibility and become a pill saint, Muronyu said confidently. At the same time, he took out the herbs for refining the 1,000 revolving water dragon pill. Everything seemed so familiar, and everything seemed so without any suspense. With Murongyu's current ability, he had already refined several furnaces of 1,000 revolving water dragon pills in less than 2 hours. There were about 40,000 revolving water dragon pills in total. What a loss, what a loss. 40 pills, and the worst one has reached 87% compatibility. Such a superb medicinal pill can only be exchanged for 150 merit points. What a loss. Looking at the 40 pills that were emitting a faint halo, Murongyu's mouth twitched. He felt that he had suffered a great loss. In fact, Muronyu did not suffer a loss. It was just that the guy who refined the pills made a lot of money. After all, when he issued the task, he just wanted to get a few ordinary 1,000 revolving water dragon pills. That was a 60 to 70% compatibility. He never thought that there would be a medicinal pill with 80% compatibility. After all, although there were many handyman disciples in the true martial temple, there were very few people who could become alchemy masters. Chapter 1354. Merit Hall. At this time, the Merit Hall was full of people as usual. There were even more people than usual. There were people in the crowd who kept looking at the entrance of the hall, as if waiting for someone to come. Not long ago, Senior Brother Tang Ming borrowed the task of refining the Tai Spirit Root Great Recovery Pill. Today should be the time to hand in the task, right? I wonder if the pill he refined has an 80% compatibility? A servant disciple said to the person next to him. As he spoke, he also looked at the entrance of the hall. He had an expectant look on his face. Senior Brother Tang Ming's alchemy skills are quite brilliant. He is a high-level alchemist among us servant disciples. He can be counted on one hand. I heard that more than 10,000 years ago, he even refined a holy pill with an 85% compatibility. Someone in the surroundings immediately exclaimed, 85% compatibility? Then isn't Senior Brother Tang Ming an alchemy grandmaster? Seeing that he had successfully attracted the attention of the surrounding people. This level 8 undying servant disciple chuckled and continued, "It's a pity that Senior Apprentice Brother Tang Ming only managed to refine a medicinal pill with 85% compatibility that one time. Moreover, even if it was a pill with an 80% compatibility, the success rate was not even 80%. Otherwise, he would have long been an alchemy grandmaster. Isn't Senior Brother Tang Ming an alchemy grandmaster?" How can it be so easy to become an alchemy grandmaster? However, I heard that many years ago, senior brother Tang Ming refined a pill with an 80% compatibility, and his success rate was already extremely close to 80%. I reckon that he has already become an alchemy grandmaster. Senior brother Tang Ming is a rank 9 undying realm cultivator. In addition to his alchemy abilities, he should have already entered the outer hall, right? Why is he still in the preparatory hall and not leaving? Someone asked. However, the person who spoke shook his head. He was not Tang Ming, so how could he know what Tang Ming was thinking? Isn't that senior brother Tang Ming? He's here. Looking at his face full of joy, I reckon that he has already successfully become an alchemy grandmaster, right? Suddenly, there was a commotion in the crowd. At the entrance, two people slowly walked in. The black-clothed youth in front had a bright smile on his face. When he saw the gazes in the hall, he smiled and nodded slightly at those who were looking over. Isn't this Murong Yu, who just became a servant disciple? Did he think we were greeting him? Too shameless, too shameless. The black-clothed youth was none other than Murong Yu, who had come to hand in his mission. At this moment, when they saw Murong Yu smiling and nodding slightly at them, as if he was a leader inspecting their work, most of the disciples in the hall couldn't help but have their faces turn black. Does he think he's senior brother Tang Ming? Damn it, he actually blocked senior brother Tang Ming. Some people gritted their teeth as they looked at Murong Yu, wanting nothing more than to rush up and beat him up. Behind Murong Yu, a young man in white who looked to be in his 20s slowly walked in with a refined smile on his face. However, from time to time, Murong Yu could feel a cold glint flashing across his body. It was obvious that this odd-job disciple, Tang Ming, was somewhat jealous of Murong Yu. Did he think that Murong Yu had stolen his thunder? Didn't that Murong Yu accept 10 missions half a month ago? It seems to be the 15th day. Could it be that he's still here to hand in his missions? Could it be that he's completed all the missions? Idiot, do you think he's a blacksmith or alchemy master, completing 10 missions in half a month? Someone immediately said disdainfully. He had no thoughts about Murong Yu. Haha, he's here to have his merit deducted, right? On average, one mission is worth 50 merit points. 10 missions would be 500 merit points. Negative 500 merit points. He might be the first among odd-job disciples, right? Someone said gloatingly. Compared to senior brother Tang Ming, he's just trash. Only senior brother Tang Ming dares to accept 10 missions at once. Who does he think he is? While the surrounding people were trampling on Murong Yu, they were also constantly flattering Tang Ming. It was as if doing so was extremely beneficial to them. Hearing everyone's discussion, the smile on Murong Yu's face didn't change. However, he sneered in his heart. You'll regret it very soon. Very soon, Murong Yu and Tang Ming had already arrived in front of the counter. Everyone also swarmed over. Among them, 11 people were quite excited. These people were the ones who had issued the missions. There were two reasons for their excitement. One was that they were going to get the high-compatibility sacred pill that Tang Ming had refined. The other 10 people were thinking about the compensation that Murong Yu would receive if he failed the mission. In particular, the two odd-job disciples who had issued the mission to repair the sacred artifact were beaming with joy. They had issued that mission because they wanted to scam some of money. If Murong Yu failed the mission, then he would receive a large sum of money as compensation. After that, they would issue another mission. If there were still people who fell for it, junior brother Tang Ming, do you want to submit the mission? Murong Yu arrived at the counter before Tang Ming, but the few women behind the counter didn't seem to see him. They just looked at Tang Ming with bright smiles. They were just ordinary outer palace disciples. Tang Ming would become an outer palace disciple sooner or later, and he might even become an alchemy grandmaster in the future. Befriending such a person was extremely beneficial to them. As for Murong Yu, he was just an odd-job disciple. They didn't care about him at all. Yes, I'm here to submit the Tai Spirit Root Great Recovery Pill. Tang Ming smiled elegantly and handed over a bottle. The white-clothed woman who had received Murong Yu earlier immediately took it. At the same time, she smiled and said, Junior brother Tang Ming, please wait for a moment. We'll appraise it, no need. Let me take a look. Before the white-clothed woman could finish speaking, a skinny old man walked out from behind the counter. The white-clothed woman immediately revealed a respectful expression as she handed the bottle to the old man. The old man took the bottle, and with a thought, a pill flew out of the bottle. Instantly, an extremely huge medicinal effect was emitted from the pill, instantly engulfing the entire hall. In an instant, the entire hall was filled with a rich medicinal fragrance. The moment he saw this pill, a glint flashed across the old man's eyes. Then, a smile appeared on his face. An 82% compatibility. Not bad. Tang Ming, what's your success rate of producing pills with 80% compatibility now? It's barely reached 80%. Tang Ming smiled elegantly, appearing very humble. However, Murong Yu, who was beside him, noticed that a smug look flashed across his eyes. An 82% compatibility and an 80% success rate. Doesn't that mean that senior brother Tang Ming has become an alchemy master? Hearing Tang Ming's words, a commotion broke out in the hall. All of them looked at Tang Ming with envy and admiration. Tang Ming still maintained a humble smile on the surface. However, the smug look in his eyes became more and more intense. On the surface, he looks like a humble person, but in reality, he's arrogant and has no future. Murong Yu shook his head, feeling disdain in his heart. Alchemy Master, you can officially become an Outer Hall disciple. You don't need to reach the undead stage. You can report to the Outer Hall tomorrow, the old man said calmly, returning to his indifference. An alchemy master was worth nurturing no matter where it was. However, in the true martial temple, alchemy masters weren't valued much. After all, as one of the most powerful cultivation holy lands of the human race, the true martial temple didn't lack alchemy masters. Senior brother Tang Ming has become an Outer Hall disciple. Everyone in the hall started discussing again, all of them extremely envious. Tang Ming bowed to the old man with a happy expression, then glanced proudly at Murong Yu beside him. It was as if he was demonstrating. However, Murong Yu treated him like heir, senior sister. I'm here to submit my mission. Murong Yu finally spoke. If he didn't speak, the woman in white probably wouldn't even bother to look at him. Oh, bring your identity token over. I can't return you the deposit, and I'll deduct your merit, the woman in white said coldly. Murong Yu narrowed his eyes slightly. Wasn't this woman's dog eyes too sharp? She actually thought that he couldn't complete a single mission. However, Murong Yu didn't get angry. He definitely wouldn't bite back just because he was bitten by a dog. What he wanted to do was to beat that mad dog to death with a stick. He wanted to show it that not just anyone could bite it. However, Murong Yu's voice still turned cold. I've already completed my mission. These are the 2 saint artifacts. They've already been repaired. Murong Yu threw the wooden box containing the 2 saint artifacts on the counter, along with his identity token. How is that possible? You're capable of refining these 2 saint artifacts? The white-clothed woman looked at Murong Yu with an expression of disbelief as her voice sharpened. Whoosh! Because of the woman in white's voice, everyone's eyes were all on Murong Yu. However, they all had the same expression as the woman in white, disbelief. Murong Yu's face was cold as he said indifferently, whether it could be repaired or not, why don't you take a look? Do you think I'll cheat you of your merit? The woman in white sneered and opened the wooden box containing the low-grade saint artifact. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk as soon as the wooden box was opened, an incomparably powerful aura rushed out, instantly enveloping the entire hall. The dazzling light that erupted from the saint artifact instantly blinded everyone's eyes. The woman in white's expression changed drastically. How could a damaged saint artifact emit such a powerful aura? Could it be that he really repaired the saint artifact? The woman in white's face was filled with disbelief. She reached out to pick up the saint artifact. However, someone was faster than her and picked up the saint artifact before she could. It was the old man who was about to leave. 999 formations. A low-grade saint artifact is the best of the best. If it wasn't limited by the material of this saint artifact, it could have been promoted to a mid-grade Saint artifact. Even so, the power of this Saint artifact has already surpassed the most ordinary mid-grade Saint artifact. The old man's divine sense entered the Saint artifact, and then a look of shock appeared on his face. 999 formations? My Saint artifact originally only had 700 formations. Haha, I've struck gold. When the owner of the Saint artifact heard the old man's words, he was stunned at first. Then, he laughed loudly as if he had gone crazy. Chapter 1355. The Artifact Hall was the same as the Achievement Hall. However, compared to the Achievement Hall, where people came and went, this place was much quieter. It could be said that it was completely deserted. However, this was normal. There were no missions issued or accepted in the Artifact Hall. One could only exchange for sacred artifacts, magic treasures, and various related materials here. The odd job disciples were relatively poor. The merit points they had were all saved up for use. Even if they came to exchange, they would exchange for what they had already chosen and leave immediately. Like the Achievement Hall, there were 3 huge crystal screens hanging on the walls of the Artifact Hall. They were sacred artifacts, magic treasures, and various related materials. Sacred artifacts and magic treasures were actually the same. However, there were some differences. Generally speaking, the so-called sacred weapons were all kinds of offensive and defensive weapons. For example, swords, spears, robes, and so on belong to the category of sacred artifacts. Things like the Yin-Yang Cauldron and the Hichu Luo Shu could be used to kill enemies and protect oneself. They were usually called magic treasures. For example, the Yin-Yang Cauldron could be used to attack and defend. However, it could also be used to refine pills. Generally speaking, magic treasures are more precious than sacred artifacts. Defensive sacred artifacts are also more valuable than offensive sacred artifacts. Muronyu thought as he strode towards the crystal screen. As for the various related materials, some of them were very cheap. However, Muronyu couldn't see these materials. He could only see their names. Therefore, he didn't know if those materials contained a huge amount of power. However, sacred artifacts and magic treasures were different. As long as he knew their grade, they would definitely contain a huge amount of power. You want to exchange for sacred artifacts? Pay with your card first. Seeing Muronyu walk over, an outer hall disciple behind the counter said sleepily. He didn't even look at Muronyu. They worked here, and very few people came here. Moreover, they didn't have any extra income. Naturally, they weren't very enthusiastic. Muronyu didn't pay any attention to him. He took out his identity token and swiped it on the counter. Then, he extended his divine sense into the Saint Artifact's big screen. Suddenly, countless information appeared in Muronyu's vision. Low-grade Saint Artifact, mid-grade Saint Artifact, high-grade Saint Artifact, top-grade Saint Artifact. The dazzling lineup was like the sand in the Ganges, impossible to count. As expected of the true martial temple, there are too many Saint Artifacts. However, why don't I see any sacred artifacts of peerless grade or above? Muronyu was puzzled. It was impossible for the true martial temple to not have Saint Artifacts and magic treasures of this level. Could it be that the odd job disciples were not qualified to see them? Thinking up to this point, he separated a strand of his divine consciousness to continue browsing through the information about the Saint Artifacts. Meanwhile, he was looking at the sleepy young man. Senior brother, why can't I see any Saint Artifacts of peerless grade or above? Is it because my level isn't high enough? Muronyu had no choice but to ask. He wanted to exchange for a supreme grade Saint Artifact to quickly raise his cultivation level. It should be known that even the trashiest supreme grade Saint Artifact contained more power than a supreme grade Saint Artifact that had been around for decades. Hearing this, the sleepy disciple immediately looked at Muronyu with disdain. As long as you're a disciple of the true martial temple, you can see any level of treasure. The prerequisite is that you have enough merit points. You're just an outer hall disciple. How much merit points can you have? At most, you can only see a mid-grade Saint Artifact. After glancing at Muronyu with disdain, the man dozed off in front of the mirror again. He did not continue to pay attention to Murong-yu. Murong-yu only smiled faintly. He could not be bothered with such a snobbish person as long as he did not go overboard and provoke him. I can't see a Supreme Grade Saint artifact with 10 million merit points. The cheapest Supreme Grade Saint artifact costs 10 million merit points. How much merit points does a Supreme Grade Saint artifact cost? Mystic Light Piercing Golden Sword costs 1 million merit points. Luoho Green Flower Sword costs 5 million merit points. Ghost Venom Soul Piercing Sword costs 7 million merit points. Murong-yu scanned the area with his divine sense and casually found a few Saint artifacts labeled as top-grade Saint artifacts. He was instantly stunned. The cheapest Supreme Grade Saint artifact cost 1 million merit points. Even the slightly better ones cost a few million. Murong-yu estimated that if it was a Supreme Grade Saint artifact, it would probably cost tens of millions of merit points. If it's a Supreme Grade Saint artifact, wouldn't it cost more than 100 million merit points to exchange for it? Murong-yu could not help but exclaim. Hearing Murong-yu's exclamation, the man could not help but glare at Murong-yu fiercely. It was as if Murong-yu had disturbed his dream. However, at the same time, he felt that something was amiss. However, he could not figure out what exactly was wrong at the moment. I didn't expect a Supreme Grade Saint artifact to be so expensive. Not to mention a servant disciple. Even an outer hall disciple would not be able to afford it. Of course, except for some tycoons. 10 million merit points. I thought I was a tycoon. However, I didn't expect to be a country bumpkin. Murong-yu mocked himself in his heart. However, he was not discouraged, because he had only entered True Martial Temple for half a month. He had obtained more than 10 million merit points in half a month. He believed that as long as he continued to stay in True Martial Temple, he would get more and more merit points. The premise was that he could refine high-grade Saint artifacts and elixirs. If he could refine a Supreme Grade Saint artifact, then he would get at least 1 million merit points. If it was a Supreme Grade Saint artifact, it would be in the hundreds of millions. Moreover, he could refine elixirs. Murong-yu estimated that the majority of the tycoons in True Martial Temple were blacksmiths and alchemists. The stronger their blacksmithing and alchemy abilities were, the more terrifying their ability to earn money was. I used 10 million merit points to exchange for 10 ordinary Supreme Grade Saint artifacts. The remaining 1 million merit points will be used in emergencies. These 10 Supreme Grade Saint artifacts should be able to raise my cultivation by a few small realms, at least to the 5th level of the undead realm. Murong-yu thought in his heart, but he did not dare to be too optimistic. There was no other way. The power he needed to raise his cultivation was too terrifying. Exchange for me the Mystic Light Sharp Golden Sword, Sun Shadow Ghost Howling Spear. Murong-yu exploded 10 ordinary Supreme Grade Saint artifacts in one breath. Each one was exactly 1 million merit points. Exactly 10 million merit points. Hearing this, the sleepy-eyed disciple grabbed Murong-yu's identity token and was about to do something. Although he disdained Murong-yu, he did not dare to make things difficult for him. Otherwise, once it was exposed, he would be in for a tragedy. Mystic Light Sharp Golden Sword, Supreme Grade Saint artifact, requires 1 million merit points. Sun Shadow Ghost Howling Spear, 1 million merit points. Supreme Grade Saint artifact. How is it possible? These are all Supreme Grade Saint artifacts? The man suddenly exclaimed. The sleepiness on his face had long disappeared. Instead, he looked at Murong-yu in shock. Murong-yu, where did you steal these merit points? You're just a handyman disciple. How can you have 11 million merit points? The man's voice was sharp and harsh. It resounded in the entire hall. Whoosh! Countless people's eyes immediately penetrated Murong-yu's body. Each of them had a strange look on their faces. It was not impossible to steal merit points. The merit points on their identity tokens could be transferred. The main thing was to steal other people's identity tokens. With a certain method, they could transfer merit points. However, Murong-yu was a handyman disciple. How could he steal so many merit points? Murong-yu's face suddenly became gloomy. That man looked down on him and disdained him. He did not bother with him. but now he was framing him for stealing merit points? At this moment, a trace of killing intent had emerged in Murong Yu's heart. Tell me the truth. Otherwise, I'll take you to the punishment hall. The man shouted coldly. His expression was cold and murderous. At this moment, he was already laughing in his heart. If Murong Yu really stole merit points, then he would have made a contribution. At that time, the Divine Temple might reward him with a few million merit points. When he thought of this, his heart began to stir, and he wanted to capture Murong Yu. Senior brother, remember to think before you speak. Some things can't be said carelessly. Murong Yu was all smiles as he looked at the man. Suddenly, his face turned cold. Did your brain get crushed by a door? I'm just a handyman disciple. Where did I steal so many merit points? Why don't you steal them for me to see? If I stole these merit points, why would I be swaggering here to exchange for Saint artifacts? Do you have a brain? You. The man did not expect Murong Yu to scold him. After all, he was an outer hall disciple and an eternal realm expert. Whether in terms of status or strength, he was stronger than Murong Yu. Which one of the others did not treat him with respect? What about me? With your intelligence, you're only suitable to sweep the fallen leaves for the mountain gate. Why are you working here? Hurry up and go through the formalities. I don't have time to talk nonsense with you. Talking to you is an insult to my intelligence. Little bastard, you really don't know how to spell the word death. The man was so angry that his face turned green and white. He suddenly roared and reached out his hand to grab Murong Yu. What's going on? All of this happened too quickly. The other people in the hall were still looking at them. They had yet to react to what had happened. Eternal Realm? This is a bit difficult. If I can beat him down, then won't I be able to fight someone who's a whole realm higher? Coupled with my skills in weapon refining and alchemy, I'm afraid someone won't tolerate me. Murong Yu thought for a moment. His body suddenly swayed and dodged the man's attack. At the same time, he retreated. The man jumped out from the counter and tried to grab Murong Yu again. His attack was swift and fierce. He actually wanted to kill Murong Yu. Murong Yu inwardly complained. He couldn't reveal too much of his strength right now. But if he did, he would not be able to fight back. However, if he exposed too much strength, he would be taken down by the other party soon. Could it be that he was going to be captured by this outer hall disciple today? Or escape from here? That would be too embarrassing. Everything he had deliberately created would go down the drain. Chapter 1356. The man's attack was swift and fierce, and Murong Yu couldn't fight back. He could only retreat. He was almost hit by the man several times. Murong Yu was furious. He didn't want to expose his ability to kill people above his level or be defeated by the man. How could he rely on others? Murong Yu's name had attracted the attention of the powerful people in the outer palace. However, the weapon hall was relatively quiet, and the news probably hadn't spread yet. Otherwise, the man wouldn't think that Murong Yu stole the merit. Suddenly, Murong Yu's eyes lit up. You've gone too far. I, Murong Yu, am not someone who can be bullied. I'll fight it out with you today. As Murong Yu roared, a medicinal pill the size of a longan fruit suddenly appeared in his hand. It was emitting a faint halo of light. Before the man could react, Murong Yu had already swallowed the medicinal pill. In the next moment, Murong Yu's aura began to surge. You're just a low-level undead stage. Even if you're an outer palace disciple of the undead stage, you can't accuse me, a servant disciple. Today, I'll kill you above my level. Murong Yu's face turned ferocious. He stopped retreating and threw a punch at the man. Thief, let me show you what the undead stage and the undead stage are. The man grinned and threw a punch at Murong Yu's fist. He wanted to crush Murong Yu's confidence inch by inch. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the fists of the two men had already fiercely collided. After a momentary pause, there was a burst of dull and deafening noise. At this moment, the entire weapon hall trembled as if it was shaken. At the same time, in the center of the battle between Murong Yu and the man, a black figure was sent flying. The sound of bones breaking resounded in the ears of everyone in the artifact hall, causing their teeth to ache. This errand boy is done for. How can an undead stage fight an undead stage. At this moment, both the staff members and the odd job disciples couldn't help but shake their heads. Naturally, he thought that the one who was sent flying was Murong-yu. However, their faces were soon filled with shock, because they suddenly discovered that the person who was sent flying wasn't Murong-yu, but rather that imperishable stage outer hall disciple. Defeating an imperishable stage expert who is a whole realm above him? Am I seeing things? Everyone was in disbelief, and some even rubbed their eyes. The imperishable stage isn't that big of a deal. You scum of the holy sanctum, you want to frame me for my merits. You're simply scum. Today, I'll capture you and send you to the punishment hall. Murong-yu roared and took a step forward. It was as if he had stepped on the void. He rushed straight toward the man who had been sent flying. Murong-yu's roar immediately awakened everyone in the hall, and they all looked at each other. They didn't want to believe it, but reality told them that Murong-yu indeed had the ability to kill an enemy who was a higher realm than him. The imperishable stage man was so angry that he was about to vomit blood. Although he was only a rank 1 imperishable stage expert, wasn't Murong-yu a rank 3 undead stage expert? There was a gap of 6 or 7 small realms between them, and even a whole realm above him. Wasn't this kind of person someone who could be casually killed with one hand? How could he suddenly become so powerful after taking a pill? Just what kind of pill did he take? How could it increase his combat power by a whole realm? He, an imperishable stage outer hall disciple, had actually lost to a rank 3 undead stage odd job disciple. This was simply a disgrace. The imperishable stage man was furious. He wanted to roar and fight back. However, Murong-yu was extremely fast. He had just been sent flying when Murong-yu had already taken a step forward and punched him again. The imperishable stage man was furious. He punched out, trying to force Murong-yu back. However, Murong-yu's fist moved forward bravely and directly smashed onto his fist. Thus, something that made the man feel extremely embarrassed appeared. His fist was like a piece of tofu in front of Murong-yu's fist. It couldn't withstand a single blow and was directly smashed. Moreover, after smashing his fist and his entire arm, Murong-yu's fist didn't stop and suddenly bombarded the man's chest. With a bang, the man's physical body was directly blown apart into pieces. What powerful strength. Is he really only a rank 3 undead stage expert? Why is an imperishable stage expert like a piece of tofu in his hands? Is he too strong? Or is the imperishable stage too weak? Everyone in the hall sucked in a breath of cold air as they watched Murong-yu blow up the imperishable stage man with a single punch. That pill's ability is so terrifying. The side effects must also be terrifying. After this incident, that servant disciple won't be able to hold on for long. It's possible that he'll be crippled for life. I wonder what pill that is. Who is that person? He actually has such a heaven-defying pill. While everyone was discussing, the man whose body had been smashed had already condensed back. At this time, his face was ferocious, and he roared, "Little bastard, you dare to smash my body." A servant disciple offending an outer hall disciple. This is an unforgivable crime. You're dead. Bang. Before the man finished speaking, Murong-yu had already stepped forward and smashed him again with a punch. You talk too much nonsense. The man was furious. He circulated his power and condensed his body again. However, this time he had learned his lesson. After condensing his body, he immediately retreated. However, what made him furious was that Murong-yu seemed to know where he would appear in advance. Before he could retreat, Murong-yu had already rushed forward. Once again, he threw a punch. The man was smashed again. The man roared angrily. He only felt endless grievance. His soul power kept fluctuating. Unfortunately, he was not a soul saint. However, everyone could feel the anger contained in the man's soul. This kid is too ruthless. We can't provoke him in the future. Seeing Murong-yu smashing the imperishable stage disciple's body again and again, the surrounding people could not help but change their expressions. With Murong-yu's strength, he could easily kill this imperishable stage outer hall disciple. However, Morong did not do so, nor did he touch his soul. He could defeat or even humiliate this person, and the true martial temple would not pursue the matter. However, if he killed someone, someone would definitely come out to stop him, especially if a servant disciple killed an outer hall disciple. That was even more unforgivable. However, Morong did not want to let him go. Therefore, he smashed the man's body again and again. He beat him until he was scared witless. In the future, when he heard his name, he would tremble in fear. This was the consequence of offending him. The imperishable stage man condensed his body again. However, this time he did not immediately try to retreat. Instead, he roared with grief and indignation. This was because he was horrified to find that his realm had been beaten down to undead stage level 9. Moreover, as his body continued to be smashed, his strength would continue to decline. Although he could repair his body every time it was smashed. However, the power required to repair his body was too great. Moreover, it required the power of the origin. The power of the origin was equivalent to a person's blood essence and the essence of power. The more it was consumed, the more it would damage his body. For example, if the imperishable stage man was beaten down, he could cultivate back to his original realm in the future. However, if his origin was injured, it would affect his aptitude, talent, and so on. Even if he could repair it, he would waste a considerable amount of time. That outer hall disciple is really pitiful. He didn't even have the strength to fight back. Seeing Morong use ferocity, everyone in the weapon hall felt a chill down their backs. However, that servant disciple is probably going to be in for a tragedy. His aura is getting weaker and weaker, and his breath is also becoming chaotic. Look, his face is getting paler and paler. Obviously, the effective period of that pill is about to pass, and the side effects are about to appear. Do you think he dares to kill that imperishable stage disciple? I don't think so. It's a serious crime for a servant disciple to kill an official disciple. While everyone was discussing, Morong smashed the body of the pitiful imperishable stage man again. At the same time, a few people walked into the hall from the outside. Isn't that senior brother Morong? What is he doing here? The people who came were all servant disciples. A level 6 undead stage person recognized Morong. Nonsense. Of course, he came to the weapon hall to exchange for saint weapons and magic treasures. Senior brother Morong, you has just received 11 million merit points. That's enough to exchange for a top-grade sacred artifact. Hearing the discussion of the two servant disciples, everyone in the hall felt their hearts skip a beat, because they all knew that the cause of the matter was that the imperishable stage man suspected that Morong had stolen merit points. Because of this, they didn't rashly intervene. However, it sounded a little strange now. Therefore, an outer hall disciple asked. The few odd job disciples then gave a brief account of what had happened in the achievement hall. Alchemy Grandmaster. It's over. After knowing Morong's identity, the people in the weapon hall couldn't help but stagger. An alchemy grandmaster, They actually watched as an alchemy grandmaster was framed and bullied without doing anything. If they were hated by Morong, they wouldn't be able to stay in the true martial temple anymore. No, we have to think of a way to remedy this. Yes, take down that pitiful outer hall disciple. A few outer hall disciples looked at each other and then pounced on Morong at the same time. Of course, their target wasn't Morong, but the imperishable stage man who had just condensed his body. Chapter 1357. Junior Brother Morong, please don't be angry. This person can frame you. We will help you send him to the punishment hall. Some of the outer hall disciples directly restrained the eternal stage man, while others stopped Morong, who was about to make a move, and persuaded him at the same time. Morong's face darkened, and his eyes flashed with a fierce light as he looked at the eternal stage man whose strength was sealed. However, under his angry expression, it was difficult to hide his increasingly chaotic aura and pale face. According to Morong's idea, although he could not kill the man, he could knock his realm down to the Great Saint realm, or even the sage realm. In this way, he could vent the anger in his heart. Of course, Moronyu did so not just to vent his anger. Venting his anger was only part of the reason. The main reason was that he wanted to make a show of strength and make an example of others. As his reputation rose, there would definitely be many people who did not agree with him, who would provoke him and make trouble for him. Once today's matter spread out, many people would definitely give up on that idea. Of course, that kind of situation could not be prevented. However, as much as possible, it would be avoided. At worst, he would find a stronger monkey and kill him to show the other monkeys. "Let me go, I'm going to kill you." Although his power had been sealed, the undead stage man was still struggling and roaring furiously. The humiliation that Moronyu gave him made him unable to calm down. The only thought in his mind was to kill Moronyu. Kill him? Hee, you'll be executed. Do you know who Moronyu is? An alchemy grandmaster. Do you know what an alchemy grandmaster is? Even in the inner hall, he's an important figure. Although he's only in the eternal stage, do you really think you can kill him? Hee, I can guarantee that before you kill him, you'll be the one who's dead. Even if there are billions of you, you can't compare to Moronyu. Several outer hall disciples sneered and transmitted their voice to the eternal stage man. The imperishable stage man was stunned. His face turned ashen. An alchemy grandmaster? If Moronyu was just an ordinary odd job disciple, or even an outer hall disciple, the holy hall might not pursue the matter if he killed him. After all, with so many disciples in the temple, it was normal for a few people to die every day. But Moronyu was an alchemy grandmaster. There must be experts from the temple protecting him in secret. Just as the outer hall disciple had said, if he wanted to kill Moronyu, then the one who would die would not be Moronyu, but him. For a moment, he even had the thought of dying. Once Moronyu really became an inner palace disciple, even if he was still a servant disciple, with his identity as an alchemy grandmaster, wouldn't it be easy for him to kill an ordinary outer palace disciple? The imperishable stage disciple's heart was filled with regret. Right now, the only thought in his mind was to fix everything that had happened because of his stupidity. Junior brother, it's not good to blow this matter up. Why don't we just let it go like this? Just send this guy to the punishment hall to receive his punishment. An outer palace disciple looked at Moronyu and smiled apologetically. Do you know how precious the pill I just took is? How big are the side effects? Can you compensate me for my loss with just one sentence? This person must die. Moronyu sneered, his face a little ferocious. Everyone's expression was a little ugly. If Moronyu was determined to kill the imperishable stage disciple, with his status, it really wasn't a difficult thing to do. But if the imperishable stage disciple was killed, then the responsibility for today's matter would be on their shoulders. Although the crime did not warrant death, some punishment was still necessary. In fact, in order to win over Moronyu, an alchemy grandmaster who might even become a pill saint, it was not impossible to expel them from the true martial temple. Junior brother Moronyu, we promise you that we will send this person to the punishment hall and let him receive the punishment he deserves. But your body, shouldn't you quickly go back and rest? At this time, Moronyu's strength had not only returned to the third level of the undying stage. His face was pale and bloodless. In addition, his chi and blood were even more chaotic. There were signs of his realm dropping. But I suffered such a big loss today. Shouldn't he do something? Moronyu nodded with an ugly expression, his face full of unwillingness. Before the other outer palace disciples could speak, the imperishable stage disciple quickly said, I'll give you all my merit points for a high-grade saint weapon. Junior brother, I'll help you transfer his merit points. An outer palace disciple immediately went to do it. It didn't take long for him to return to his original spot. In addition to returning Morongyu's identity token to Moronyu, there were also the 10 top-grade saint weapons. In the end, Moronyu plundered the imperishable stage man's high-grade saint artifacts, mid-grade saint artifacts, and other valuable items before leaving the artifact hall in a leisurely manner. Cough, cough. On the way, Moronyu was very fast, but many people saw him coughing up blood, and his face was even more frightening. At this moment, The news of Murong Yu defeating the Undying Outer Hall's disciples in the Artifact Hall spread once again. This made Murong Yu, who was already famous, even more famous. The Outer Palace disciples are usually high and mighty, looking down on us odd job disciples. Weren't they defeated by us Outer Palace disciples? A Stage 3 Undying Stage Expert can defeat an imperishable stage expert. The Outer Palace disciples are no big deal. Senior Brother Murong, you helped us vent our anger. It's just a pity that the pills Senior Brother Murong took had too many side effects. I'm worried that he won't be able to recover. That bastard, I really want to chop him up. If something happens to Senior Brother Murong Yu, and he can't refine pills. The one who said this was the person who originally wanted to ask Murong Yu to refine pills. Originally, it was 3 days later. Now, that Murong Yu is so badly injured, would he be able to refine pills after 3 days? One had to know that there were many people who wanted to ask Murong Yu to refine pills and weapons. The higher the price, the more time passed, the more prepared others would be. The higher the price they had to pay. Sure enough, when Murong Yu returned to his courtyard, he immediately hung up a banner that read, "Artifact refining and pill refining in 10 days. If he still can't recover, the time will be extended." After seeing this flag, the odd job disciples who wanted to refine pills and weapons all cursed loudly. Of course, they weren't cursing Murong Yu, but the few Outer Palace disciples. After hanging the flag, Murong Yu set up a few arrays in his courtyard. After isolating himself from all divine wills, he entered the Hichu Luoshu world. The moment he entered, he had a huge change. Originally, he was sickly and looked like he was about to die. But in an instant, he became energetic and ferocious. This was because Murong Yu didn't suffer any injuries at all. There were no side effects. The pill he took was just an antidote pill that he refined when he was practicing. The reason why he did that was because he wanted to hide his powerful strength. Otherwise, he would be exposed. But now that he had achieved his goal, he had an excuse to explode his strength in the future. Moreover, after this matter, he could announce to the outside world that he was a divine doctor and that any difficult and complicated illness couldn't stump him, because his miserable state was obvious to everyone. If he went out after 10 days or 8 months, he would become energetic and ferocious. Even if no one believed it, they would have to believe it. At that time, a large number of people would come to him to refine weapons, refine pills, and treat illnesses. At that time, wouldn't merit come rolling in like a torrent? Murong Yu chuckled as he thought about how pleased he was with himself. However, he quickly dispelled those thoughts from his mind and took out the 10 top-grade saint artifacts he had exchanged for. Originally, it was impossible to obtain the sacred artifact that had been exchanged for so quickly. But because they wanted to curry favor with Murong Yu, those people used all means to get these 10 top-grade sacred tools to Murong Yu in the shortest time possible. Last time, 11 top-grade sacred tools raised my realm from the 3rd rank Undead Realm to the peak 3rd rank Undead Realm. These 10 top-grade sacred tools probably can't even reach the peak 4th rank Undead Realm. But breaking through to the 4th rank Undead Realm shouldn't be a problem. Thinking in his heart, he had already swallowed all these top-grade sacred tools and then began to smelt them. The power of 10 top-grade sacred tools was extremely huge, and there was no suspense. Under Murong Yu's few attacks, his realm broke through again in less than a day, successfully rising to the 4th rank Undead Realm. However, although the power contained in 10 top-grade sacred tools was huge, but the power Murong Yu needed was even more terrifying. He was like a bottomless pit. After absorbing the power of 10 top-grade sacred tools, Murong Yu's realm only rose to the early 4th rank Undead Realm, not even reaching the peak 4th rank Undead Realm. Murong Yu estimated that if he wanted to reach the peak 4th rank Undead Realm, he would need at least 10 more top-grade sacred tools. This couldn't help but give Murong Yu a headache, but fortunately, he was now in the true martial temple. As long as he had enough merit, he could exchange a large number of top-grade sacred tools. He could even refine top-grade sacred tools himself. However, Moron, you could only inscribe 2,000 formations in the sacred tools now. High-grade sacred tools required at least 5,000 formations. He didn't even have the ability to refine high-grade sacred tools, let alone top-grade sacred tools. Therefore, after he broke through, he used a period of time to consolidate his cultivation and began to refine. If he wanted to obtain a large amount of merit, he would need to have more brilliant refining methods and refine higher-level sacred tools. As for refining pills, now that he had reached the level of alchemy grandmaster, it was enough. Time passed day by day, and Moron Yu's refining methods became more and more brilliant. However, Moron Yu, who was immersed in refining, did not know that there were already many people gathered outside his courtyard on Yangwu Peak at this time, because the 10-day deadline was almost up. Chapter 1358. Bang! In the Hichu Luoshu world, Moron Yu was refining a medium holy weapon. However, just when a medium quality saint artifact was about to be refined successfully and he was about to add the final formation, it exploded loudly. All his efforts were for naught. 4,999 formations. Moron Yu wasn't dejected. He just felt a little depressed. Ever since he broke through, he had been refining weapons here. As his strength increased and he became more proficient in refining weapons, he engraved more and more formations in the holy weapon. Before his breakthrough, he could only engrave 2,000 formations in the holy weapon at most. If he exceeded that, the holy weapon wouldn't be able to withstand it and would explode. After making a breakthrough in his strength, Moron Yu could easily carve up to 3,000 arrays. From this, one could see the relationship between refining weapons, refining pills, and strength. The stronger one was, the easier it was to engrave formations. Of course, this only referred to those with talent in refining weapons. If one didn't have any talent in refining weapons, even if he reached the supreme stage, he wouldn't be able to engrave more than a few formations. In other words, even if he only engraved one formation, the holy weapon would explode. At that time, Moron Yu felt that if he was in the undead stage, he would probably be able to refine a high holy weapon. Although he was able to carve up to 4,999 formations after a period of time, after continuous hard work and experimentation, he was able to carve up to 4,999 formations. However, he couldn't break through the last step. As long as he could engrave 5,000 formations, he would be able to refine a high holy weapon. I'm still not strong enough. Moron Yu stopped trying and shook his head helplessly. If he continued to try, Moron Yu might be able to engrave 5,000 formations one time. However, he couldn't keep engraving 5,000 formations. It was useless. Moreover, it was more than enough to refine a mid-grade saint artifact with 4,999 formations. Generally speaking, the difference between a medium holy weapon and a high holy weapon depended on the formations in the huge rock. Those below 5,000 and above 1,000 were medium holy weapons. Those above 5,000 were high holy weapons. However, regardless of the level of the holy weapon, they all had a common characteristic. That was because there were very few sacred artifacts that had reached the pinnacle of formations. For example, there were 999 formations on low-grade saint artifacts, 4,999 formations on medium-grade saint artifacts, 9,999 formations on high-grade saint artifacts, and so on. Sacred artifacts with ultimate formations were usually more powerful, comparable to ordinary sacred artifacts of a higher grade. As a result, Moron Yu's medium-quality saint artifacts were comparable to regular high-quality saint artifacts. This was more than enough for the odd-job disciples. Whoosh! Moron Yu's figure appeared in the courtyard. But as soon as he appeared, he was shocked. This was because countless people had gathered outside the courtyard, densely surrounding the entire courtyard. However, no one dared to step into the courtyard. Moron Yu was stunned for a moment before he reacted. It seemed that today was the 10th day. Senior brother Moron Yu is out. He's out. The moment Moron Yu came out, he was discovered by many odd jobs disciples. Immediately, one by one, they looked over. There was an uproar in the crowd. Senior brother Moronyu is as vigorous as a dragon and ferocious as a tiger. He looks completely different from before when he was injured. Could it be that his injuries have all healed? Seeing Moronyu brimming with energy, the other odd-job disciples became excited. Each and every one of them was overjoyed. Of course, it was unknown how many of them were really happy for Moronyu. A considerable number of them were happy because Moronyu could refine weapons and pills for them after he recovered. Nonsense! Senior brother Moronyu is an alchemy grandmaster. He can easily refine a few divine pills to heal his previous injuries. Someone immediately roared as if he knew Moronyu very well. Seeing everyone's expression, listening to their exclamations and flattery, Moronyu's face revealed a bright smile. Of course, he did not think that these people were sincerely happy for him. However, wasn't Moronyu the same? In his eyes, these people were all merits that could move around. Moronyu, are you okay? A voice came, and Fan Jian still stepped into Moronyu's courtyard. Now, only Fan Jian dared to come in without Moronyu's permission. Moronyu nodded to Fan Jian. Because of his cultivation method, although he did not pry into Fan Jian's heart, but he felt what kind of person Fan Jian was. Although they had not known each other for a long time, Fan Jian was sincerely happy for Moronyu. This was a friend worthy of deep friendship and could even develop into a brother. These people, have you really started refining weapons and pills? You have just recovered. Do you want to rest for a while? Fan Jian frowned slightly and said in a deep voice. Moronyu shook his head. It's okay. I need merit now. I'm not afraid of them coming to me to refine weapons and pills. I'm afraid that they won't come to me. Smiling, Moronyu looked at the people outside the courtyard and said loudly, From now on, I will accept missions to refine weapons and pills. But I will only accept 10 missions at a time. Refining a middle-grade sacred weapon will cost 50,000 merit points. As for pills, it will also cost 50,000 merit points. Any pill will be the same. However, I guarantee that at least half of the pills will have a compatibility of 90%. Hiss! When they heard Moronyu speak, the people outside were very happy, because Moronyu was finally going to refine pills. However, when they heard the high price, they couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Expensive. 50,000 merit points. Many people present had 50,000 merit points, but they had accumulated it over the years. With 50,000 merit points, they could exchange for many cultivation resources, but only for a middle-grade sacred weapon. Was it worth it? It should be known that 50,000 merit points could be exchanged for some decent middle-grade sacred weapons in the weapon hall. Compared to a sacred weapon, a sacred pill was still acceptable. After all, it had a compatibility of 90%. Even if they did not need it, they could take it outside to exchange for what they needed. After all, merit points could only be exchanged for various resources in the true martial temple. Senior brother Moronyu, is 50,000 merit points too expensive? Someone could not help but ask. Moronyu looked at the person who spoke indifferently and did not say anything. He only sneered in his heart. Was it too expensive? It was already very cheap. In a few days, they would know whether it was worth it or not. Senior brother Moronyu, I need to refine a middle-grade sacred weapon. These are the materials. Senior brother Moron, I need to refine the Dubby Turtle Snake Pill. These are the materials. Just as that person raised his hand, a few people immediately spoke up. Moronyu took a look and found that there were exactly 10 people. Thus, a bright smile appeared on his face. 500,000 merit points were in his hands. Although it was not enough to exchange for the trashiest top-grade sacred weapon, his assets would slowly accumulate. You're my first batch of customers. Don't worry, you won't lose out. On the contrary, I will give you a surprise. After taking their materials, Moronyu said to them with a smile. Then, he turned around and was about to enter the house. However, at this moment, the servant disciple who spoke first suddenly said, Senior brother Moron, may I ask when you will be done refining my sacred weapon? Because I have to go on a mission in a month. Moronyu paused and turned to the person with a grin. Don't worry, you will definitely be able to take this sacred weapon before you go on a mission. After saying that, Murong strode into the house. Refining a middle-grade sacred weapon in a month? Isn't senior brother Murong only an alchemy master? Refining a middle-grade sacred weapon in a month? Regardless of whether it was refining weapons or pills, the higher the grade, compatibility, or level of the sacred weapon or pill, the longer the time needed to refine it. Ordinary people would need at least 10 days to refine a sacred weapon, or even longer. After all, refining a sacred weapon was not the same as repairing a sacred weapon. I believe that senior brother Murong can do it. That person seemed to have a lot of confidence in Murong. Then you just wait to receive the sacred weapon. 50,000 merit points for a middle-grade sacred weapon. You guys are really sending yourselves to be slaughtered by him. Someone said disdainfully. It was probably someone who was jealous of Murong. Idiot. Even if senior brother Murong's weapon is trash, we will still make a profit. Didn't you hear senior brother Murong say that we are the first batch of customers? Do you know what that means? The first batch of customers. Murong will definitely have a deep impression of us. We are the first batch of people to support him. In the future, when senior brother Murong grows up and we go to him for help, will he take into account today's feelings and take extra care of us? This is called investment. Do you understand? Some of the people who gave Murong the materials looked at the disdainful people around them and said, disdainfully, "This seems to make a lot of sense. Why didn't I think of this?" The people around them were stunned. Then they all regretted it. These 10 people's actions today were equivalent to sending charcoal in snowy weather. And those who sent charcoal in snowy weather would eventually be remembered by those who helped. Hurry up and borrow merit points and prepare all kinds of materials. When Murong comes out, we must find him to refine sacred weapons, pills. Many people were inspired and quickly left the place. However, a considerable number of people stayed outside the courtyard. Out of the 10 people, exactly half of them are refining weapons and pills. Let's refine first. Murong took out a material. While smelting and purifying it, he thought of the owner of this material, a saber. He was used to using sabers. It was precisely because he couldn't find a suitable sacred weapon that he needed Murong to refine it. Otherwise, he could have directly exchanged for it. In Murong mind, a saber gradually took shape. This was one of the steps of refining weapons, the formation. It was also the diagram of refining weapons in the secular world. However, Murong didn't need to draw it. He just needed to imagine it in his mind. Chapter 1359. With a thought, a saber condensed from power appeared in front of Murong. The saber was about 1.2 meters long, which was about a centimeter longer than an ordinary saber. It was single and slightly curved with a long blade. The blade flashed with a cold light that penetrated one's heart. There was a divine dragon coiling around the hilt of the saber. Not only was it extremely sharp, but it was also filled with murderous intent. Murong reached out and grabbed the saber in his hand. Then he slashed out with the saber. Boom! A black saber light shot out from the tip of the saber and tore through the void. It was like a huge waterfall that traversed the void and slashed fiercely at the mountain in the distance. After an earth-shattering sound, the mountain was instantly smashed into pieces and turned into dust that disappeared between heaven and earth. Murong frowned slightly. A weapon, in addition to activating its own power, can also enhance the power of its owner, using one part of the power to create 10% of the power. Only then can it be considered the best among weapons. Murong pondered in his heart, but the saber in his hand began to change. The blade became longer, and the distance between the blade and the back of the saber became shorter. The hilt of the saber also became longer, which was more suitable for holding. Boom! Murong slashed out with the saber again. After an earth-shattering sound, another mountain in front of him was smashed into pieces. However, it was different from the previous mountain that was smashed into pieces. This mountain was split into 2 halves. However, a lot of the cracks in the middle were broken. From afar, it looked like a natural moat. The power is not uniform. One part of the power can be used to create 70% of the power. The proportion of the saber is not perfect. Murong began to modify it again. After many times, Murong slashed out with the saber again. Chi after a sharp sound. The mountain in front of him was unscathed. However, Murong face revealed smile. One part of the power can be used to create 10% of the power, and it is extremely sharp. Although that mountain does not seem to have changed much. It has been split into two halves from the middle. As he spoke, Murong's spiritual will enveloped the mountain. As a result, he saw an almost imperceptible and extremely smooth crack dividing the entire mountain into two halves. This was the perfect saber. Murong withdrew from the Hichu Luoshu and began to control the various liquids that had been melted in a liquid and began to slowly fuse them together. 2 hours later, a sacred artifact embryo appeared in front of Murong. It was the same as the saber he had condensed with his power. The size, length, etc. were all the same. The reason why it was called an embryo was because it was still an ordinary weapon. It was just that it was countless times sharper than an ordinary weapon. If he wanted to become a saint artifact, he would have to inscribe a formation on it. Murong had already thought of the position and layout of each array formation. Thus, after the war blade took shape, Murong continued to send one array after another into the sacred artifact. 1,000 formations, 2,000 formations, 4,000 formations, 4,900 formations. At this point, Murong's speed of inscribing the formations was getting slower and slower. After inscribing at least 4,998 formations, Murong stopped. At this moment, his expression was solemn, and his spirit was raised to the extreme. The last formation. Murong took a deep breath, and then slowly sent the last formation that he had been brewing for a long time into the war blade in front of him. It's almost a day. I wonder how far senior brother Murong has gone. Is it the formation? Or is he refining various materials? Or is he inscribing formations? Do you think it's easy to refine weapons? You can inscribe formations in a day. Do you think it's a meal? Someone immediately refuted. Refining a sacred artifact required a lot of materials. Even if it did not require a lot of materials, refining those materials would take a very long time. Being able to refine 1 or 2 materials in a day was already quite powerful, not to mention the formation and shape. Especially when it came to inscribing formations, the slightest carelessness would cause all the previous efforts to go to waste. Senior brother Murong, you might have already smelted those materials and is probably taking shape now, a disciple said faintly. He needs at least a month to refine a sacred artifact. Moreover, I'm afraid he can't refine anything good in such a short time. Someone said faintly, having no confidence in Murong at all. With the exception of a few people, everyone nodded in agreement. That was what they thought as well. Boom! At this moment, an incomparably huge aura suddenly came from Murong's courtyard. It swept in all directions in an instant. For a moment, the odd-job disciples outside the courtyard were all caught off guard and were all suppressed. Some people were even suppressed to the point that their blood and chi surged like a raging river. What's going on? Did the sacred artifact explode? Everyone reacted very quickly and quickly stabilized their bodies. At the same time, someone exclaimed, refining weapons would cause them to explode, and refining pills would cause the furnace to explode. Once this happened, it meant that the weapon or pill refinement had failed. The higher the level of the sacred artifact or pill refinement, the stronger the explosion of power when the refinement failed. In fact, many weapon refiners and pill refiners have been killed by the explosion of their sacred artifacts and pills. Of course, there was another possibility for this to happen, which was that the weapon refinement or pill refinement had succeeded. However, Murong had only been refining for a day, so how could he have succeeded? Therefore, the first thought that came to everyone's mind was that Murong had failed. It failed right away. Could it have exploded when it was taking shape? Someone said, taking pleasure in Yi Futian's misfortune. He seemed to be very happy. However, Before he finished speaking, a dazzling and intense holy light shot up into the sky from Murong Yu's courtyard and into the nine heavens. At the same time, an aura that was even more vast and powerful than before spread out in all directions like a tide. This is the phenomenon of heaven and earth when the weapon refinement is successful. Senior Brother Murong, you have succeeded? It's only been a day. Someone roared with a face full of shock. What a powerful aura. It's already comparable to an imperishable stage expert. Could it be that Senior Brother Murong has refined a high-grade sacred artifact? Someone exclaimed. A mid-grade sacred artifact's power was equivalent to an undying stage expert, while a high-grade sacred artifact was equivalent to an imperishable stage expert, and so on. Did he really succeed? He refined a sacred artifact in a day. Could it be that Senior Brother Murong, you had refined it before, and now he just added the last formation? Otherwise, how could he have refined such a powerful weapon in a day? Fan Jian, accept the merit. Just as everyone was exclaiming and questioning, Murong Yu's voice shot out from the courtyard. Accompanying the voice were two rays of light, one strong and one weak. The two rays of light floated in the air above the courtyard. The one that emitted a weak light was Murong Yu's identity token. The other strong and dazzling light was a long battle saber that flickered with cold light and burst out with oppressive killing intent. A soul-stirring chill was constantly emitted from the battle saber, and the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped a lot. The odd-job disciples who were close to the courtyard felt their hair stand on end. What a powerful battle saber. Is it really a high-grade sacred artifact? Seeing the battle saber emitting cold intent, the surrounding servant disciples looked at the battle saber with burning eyes, and they didn't hide the envy in their eyes. It's just my battle saber. Ha! A servant disciple laughed out loud. After taking out his identity token and transferring 50,000 merit points to Murong Yu's identity token, he grabbed the battle saber. A drop of blood essence was forced out of his fingertip and dripped onto the battle saber. The blood essence instantly seeped into the battle saber, and the servant disciple felt the connection between the battle saber and himself, as if it was his own body and arm. It recognized an owner just like that? The servant disciple couldn't help but exclaim. Whether it was a sacred artifact or a divine artifact, the more owners it had, the harder it was to recognize an owner. Even if it was a newly refined sacred artifact, it was impossible to completely recognize an owner in a few days. This was because the sacred artifact was more or less related to the refiner. If one wanted to recognize an owner, one had to completely expel the mind and aura left by other people in the sacred artifact. The more thoroughly it was expelled, the faster it would recognize an owner, and the more thorough the recognition between them would be. The servant disciple never expected that this battle saber didn't have anyone's mind and aura. Murong Yu, the refiner, didn't even leave his aura on the battle saber. Even those great grandmasters couldn't do it. After exclaiming, the servant disciple's mind sank into the sacred artifact. Then he saw the dense array engraved on the sacred artifact. 4,999 formations. After counting carefully, the odd-job disciple cried out in surprise. What? 4,999 formations? The limit of a middle-grade sacred artifact? This is more powerful than a high-grade sacred artifact with 5,000 arrays. The surrounding people were immediately shocked, and one by one, they came over to watch. The servant disciple simply took out the battle saber, and it floated in the void. Then a large amount of divine consciousness poured in. There really are 4,999 arrays. What an exquisite array. I didn't expect that these arrays could be combined together like this. They fused and connected with each other extremely smoothly. And it's not more powerful than an ordinary array combination. Top grade, it's definitely the top grade among middle grade sacred artifacts. This battle saber is definitely worth more than 50,000 merit points. It's even worth 200,000 merit points. Everyone exclaimed. Senior brother, quickly try the power of this sacred artifact. Someone urged. They all wanted to see the power of this sacred artifact. Good. The odd job disciple immediately shouted. With a thought, a torrent of power poured into the sacred artifact. Rumble, a dazzling sacred light shot out, accompanied by an extremely powerful force. Bang, bang, bang. At the first moment, the surrounding people were caught off guard, and one by one, they were sent flying like broken rag dolls. Some people even began to vomit blood in midair. Chapter 1360. In just an instant, the odd job disciple near the saber was sent flying and vomited blood. Some of the more serious ones were even knocked unconscious. The odd job disciple with the saber was startled. With a thought, he cut off the power he was channeling into the saber. If he continued to pour it in, he was afraid that someone would be killed by the power of the saber. What terrifying power! It's equivalent to the full strength attack of a low-level undead stage expert, right? A disciple stood up from the ground. He didn't even bother to pat the mud off his body as he exclaimed. The other disciples also stood up from the ground. Although they were a little depressed, no one blamed the owner of the saber. After all, they were the ones who had asked the odd job disciple to activate the saber's power. They were only envious, extremely envious. A saber that could unleash an attack from an undead stage expert. This was equivalent to having an undead stage expert by his side. Moreover, this undead stage expert would listen to his commands. Although he was an undead stage expert, his strength was comparable to an undead stage expert. How could they not be envious? While they were envious, they also felt more and more regretful. As for the remaining people who had given Moron the materials, they were looking forward to it. In particular, the eyes of those who had refined saint artifacts were shining. He refined a medium saint artifact comparable to a high saint artifact in a day. I wonder if this is Senior Moron used normal speed or an extraordinary performance. We'll know when we see. A day isn't long. It'll pass very quickly, someone said. While everyone was either regretting, anticipating, or envious, Moron had already begun to refine the second saint artifact. At the same time, the news of Moron forging a mid-grade saint artifact with 4,999 formations spread like wildfire throughout the preparatory hall and even the outer hall. What? Forging a mid-grade saint artifact with 4,999 formations in a single day? When they heard the news, the master craftsmen and grandmaster craftsmen in the outer hall couldn't help but be shocked. At the very least, master artificers could refine mid-grade saint artifacts. The more brilliant ones could even refine high-grade saint artifacts. As for weapon refinement grandmasters, they could even refine supreme-grade and supreme-grade saint artifacts. It was extremely powerful. However, the more proficient one was in refining tools, the more they knew how powerful it was to be able to refine an ultimate formation. Even for master artificers, it was extremely difficult for them to forge a mid-grade saint artifact with 4,999 formations. Even if he could, he would only succeed once in a while. It was impossible for him to continuously refine a sacred artifact with the same number of formations. Maybe he was just lucky enough to succeed in refining it. After the initial shock, the weapon refining master and weapon refining grandmaster regained their composure. Time flew by, and a day quickly passed. Rumble, just like before, in just one day, an incomparably vast aura erupted from the courtyard. At the same time, it was accompanied by a dazzling and blinding holy light. Swish! A beam of light shot out from the courtyard and hovered in the air above the courtyard. Dazzling and powerful rays of light burst out continuously, suppressing everything. It was a 2-meter-long spear that was emitting a black light, although the spear was quietly suspended in the void. However, a powerful aura was emitted from the long spear. The tip of the spear was shining with cold light, and it was constantly swallowing and spitting out terrifying black spear light. Fan Jian was stunned, but he quickly reacted. He stretched out his big hand and grabbed the spear. This is my sacred artifact. Although it's a little different from what I originally imagined, it's more beautiful than what I thought. but it seems to be more beautiful than what I had originally imagined. A janitor disciple rushed out from the crowd and stretched out his big hand to grab the long spear. Fan Jian took a step back and looked indifferently at the servant disciple who was full of excitement. The servant disciple was stunned for a moment, but then he reacted. He took out his identity token and quickly transferred 50,000 merit points to Murong Yu's identity token. Fan Jian then handed the spear to the servant disciple. 4,999 formations. Ha! After the servant disciple recognized the owner, he immediately checked the formations in the sacred artifact. When he saw the 4,999 spirit formations, he burst into loud laughter. It was as if he had gone mad. Whoosh! Everyone quickly retreated. They did not want to be injured by the sacred artifact again. On the second day of refining, Murong Yu refined the second sacred artifact. It was also 4,999 formations, and it also had the power of a high-grade sacred artifact. The first time, it took him a day to refine a sacred artifact with 4,999 formations. This could be said to be luck. However, the second time, it took him a day to refine a sacred artifact with the same formation. Perhaps it could also be said to be luck. At least, many people thought so. Even a master craftsman and master craftsmen in the outer palace thought so. However, did they really think so? Or did they not want to admit Murong Yu's ability? No one knew. On the third day, almost at the same time, the light of the successful refining of the sacred artifact shot out from Murong Yu's courtyard again. The refining was successful again. When they saw the familiar light and aura, the servant disciples who were wandering outside Murong Yu's courtyard were no longer as shocked and surprised as they were 2 days ago. They only glanced at the light in silence before withdrawing their gazes. From what they knew, they seemed to be used to all of this. Instead, they would find it strange if they could not refine a sacred artifact in a day. A mid-grade saint artifact with 4,999 formations. When that service disciple revealed the array formation inside the array formation, the surrounding service disciple had an indifferent look on their faces. However, this did not mean that everyone was the same. The master craftsmen and master craftsmen in the outer palace twitched their faces. Some of them were shocked, some of them looked sinister, and some of them had resentment in their eyes. Some of them were even secretly thinking about how to get rid of Murong Yu. After all, Murong Yu is only a servant disciple now and could only refine mediocre sacred artifacts. However, when he became an outer palace disciple and could refine high, supreme, or peerless sacred artifacts, who would ask these master craftsmen and master craftsmen to refine them? When that time came, wouldn't they lose their jobs? Moreover, they all had a feeling that it was not long before they lost their jobs. Didn't you see that Murong Yu was not only a monster in craftsman and alchemy? His cultivation speed was also extremely terrifying. He had only joined the sect for half a month and had already advanced by a small realm. If he was given a few more months, wouldn't he be able to advance to the imperishable stage? On the fourth day, another mediocre sacred artifact was refined. On the fifth day, the fifth sacred artifact was refined. They were all mediocre sacred artifacts with 4,999 formations and were extremely powerful. I wonder how long Senior Brother Murong Yu will take to refine pills? His ability to refine pills is above that of craftsmen. Will there be a supreme pill with a 95% compatibility rate this time? After the fifth day, everyone was looking forward to it again. However, although this question appeared in their hearts, each of them was extremely confident. Sure enough, on the sixth day, a dazzling light soared into the sky. At the same time, it was accompanied by an incomparably rich pill fragrance. As expected, it's another day. Everyone's faces were filled with anticipation. They all wanted to know how high the compatibility of Murong Yu's pills was. There are 7 pills that are emitting a halo. Although the other 3 pills don't have a halo, the quality is also extremely good. They all have at least an 87% compatibility. The compatibility of pills was different from the formations of sacred artifacts. The formations of sacred artifacts were very direct and could be seen by anyone. However, the compatibility of pills could not be seen by ordinary people. Only those master craftsmen or extremely knowledgeable people could see it, as expected of an alchemy grandmaster. The value of this pill is definitely far more than 50,000 merit points. The servant disciple was so enraptured that he almost danced with joy. The pills that were circulated outside were generally pills with 60% to 80% compatibility. The higher the compatibility, the higher the value. And those that reached 90% compatibility were the objects that many alchemists used to study. Usually, they could be sold for a high price. 7 pills that were emitting a faint halo were definitely worth more than 200,000 merit points. In the next few days, Morong still maintained the speed of refining a bottle of pills a day and finished refining the remaining 4 sets of pills. Even the worst ones had 7 pills with a 90% compatibility rate, and the highest number of pills was 9. However, the most was 8 pills. In other words, Morong had an 80% chance of refining pills that reached 90% compatibility. In fact, these servant disciples could not distinguish the specific compatibility of those pills at all. What they didn't know was that each of their bottles contained pills with a 93% compatibility rate. There were also pills with 92% and 91% compatibility. However, they could not tell. They believed that many people could easily tell and the news would spread quickly. Senior apprentice Brother Morong is out. I wonder how many missions he will accept this time. I must be the first to respond. Seeing Morong come out, many servant disciples outside the courtyard were eager to make a move. However, what made them speechless was that after Morong came out, he did not say a word and just waved his hand. Suddenly, they saw the words on the flag in the courtyard change to "Stop accepting any missions. The specific time will be determined later." Then, without waiting for those odd job disciples to react, Morong figure flashed and disappeared. At this moment, Morong had already entered the Hichu Luoshu world. I did not expect that refining weapons and pills could strengthen the soul. I wonder if those blacksmiths and alchemists are also soul-sanctified experts? Morong was pleasantly surprised as he looked at the soul pond that had expanded a little. Chapter 1361. Ever since he had broken through to the second stage of the Shi character formula, Morong's soul pond had expanded to a radius of 250 kilometers. Although Morong had been cultivating non-stop, he had only been able to fill up his soul pond with soul power. His soul pond hadn't grown at all. However, during the process of refining and refining, his soul pond had undergone some changes. The soul lake now had a radius of about 550 miles. Although it hadn't broken through yet, it was much stronger than before. As his soul strength continued to grow, the power of Morong's mind naturally grew stronger as well. As the power of his mind grew stronger, Morong became more and more adept at refining, and setting up formations. My soul strength has increased by a small realm, reaching the 6th heavenly layer of the 2 stars realm. I can now easily kill experts at the peak of the imperishable realm. I have a greater chance of killing low-level profound sages. I wonder if I can refine high-grade sacred artifacts? Morong muttered to himself as a pile of materials appeared in front of him. These materials were relatively high-grade, and Morong had taken them from the refining materials of the 5 people. In other words, the extra materials were perfect for him to practice with. Bang! However, when Morong finished refining the 4,999 formations and sent in the 5,000 formation, the formations instantly underwent a change and directly exploded. 5,000 formations exploded at the same time. What kind of concept was that? The sacred artifacts that hadn't yet become sacred artifacts were directly blown to smithereens. If it weren't for Morong's quick reaction and the timely use of Hichu Luoshu's power to suppress this violent force, he would have been in a sorry state. I already have that feeling, but I'm still missing something. Murong-yu didn't continue refining. Instead, he pondered and experienced the feeling of refining. At that time, he felt that he could already inscribe the 5,000th formation, and he had already done so. Immediately, Murong-yu felt as if the weapon in his hand had turned into a high-grade sacred artifact. However, a split second later, Murong-yu discovered that the 5,000 formation was completely out of tune with the previous formations. However, before Murong-yu could make any adjustments, all of the formations had already exploded. The 5,000 formations were in a rather harmonious flow, but why did they explode? Murong-yu frowned slightly and took out another set of materials to refine. However, the result was still the same. At the 5,000th array formation, the sacred artifact exploded. The 4,999 formations in front of you have already become a whole. Although you feel that the formation you added at the back is very smooth and harmonious, it's still not the same. But in reality, it seemed to have been forcefully added. It was like forcibly placing a huge rock in a small stream, blocking the flow of water. Over time, the water in the stream would naturally burst its banks. Your 4,999 formations were much more powerful than the stream's ability. They would explode in an instant. Just as Murong-yu was puzzled and was about to try again, Hichu's voice sounded. "Why can't I see it?" Murong-yu frowned and asked. Refining not only requires a strong mind, but also a strong cultivation realm. The undead stage is still too low. Being able to refine a mid-grade sacred artifact is already your limit. If you want to refine a mid-grade sacred artifact, you have to at least reach the undead stage. Hichu explained. Murong-yu rolled his eyes. "Why didn't you say so earlier? Why did you watch me waste so many materials?" Hichu was immediately speechless. "Even if I told you, you would have tried a few times before giving up. It's better to tell you after you failed." Murong-yu's face darkened, but he also knew that Hichu was telling the truth. Because his character was like this, even if it was Hichu's words, he wouldn't completely believe it. He had to try it himself before he believed it. Murong-yu tried a few more times before giving up. He had to give up because he no longer had the materials to refine a mid-grade sacred artifact and a high-grade sacred artifact. My soul has reached the 2-star 6th heavenly layer. It's still far away from the 3-star soul. If I want to improve quickly, I need to devour a large number of souls. But where can I devour a large number of souls? Murong-yu muttered in his heart. In fact, it was more difficult to improve the soul's strength than the cultivation realm. After all, Murong-yu was in the true martial temple. As long as he had enough merit, he could exchange for a large number of high-grade sacred artifacts. Murong-yu's body was similar to his soul. Since that's the case, I'll raise my cultivation first. Once I become an outer hall disciple, I'll be able to enter the secret area controlled by the true martial sacred hall to cultivate. Murong-yu pondered for a moment, then left the He-Tu and Luo-Shu and appeared in the courtyard. Swoosh! Immediately, countless gazes shot from different directions and penetrated his body. Swoosh! A figure stepped on the air and appeared in the courtyard. He was less than 2 meters away from Murong-yu. He looked at Murong-yu with a mocking expression and said, "You're Murong-yu? I want to ask you to refine 10 mid-grade sacred artifacts with 4,999 formations. Each one is worth 500,000 merit points." Originally, when they heard that this disciple was so fast and snatched the job in front of everyone, those who were waiting for Murong-yu to refine the artifacts were very unhappy. Just as they were about to scold him, they heard him say 500,000 merit points. Suddenly, they were collectively speechless. Mid-grade sacred artifacts were powerful. A mid-grade sacred artifact with 4,999 formations was worth 500,000 merit points. However, they were all handyman disciples. Who would have so many merit points? This was because most of their merit points had been used to exchange for various items. Even if they collected 500,000 merit points, when would they be able to pay it back? Murong-yu narrowed his eyes slightly and looked at the young man standing in front of him. Although this person had suppressed his cultivation level to the peak of the undead stage level 9. However, the intense light radiating from his body couldn't escape Murongyu's eyes. Undead stage level 9. Are those weapon refinement masters from the outer palace finally unable to hold back and want to make a move? Murongyu sneered in his heart. Then he turned his gaze and looked at the handyman disciples outside. Wherever his gaze passed, many intense lights shot up into the sky. These people were obviously disciples from the outer palace who had disguised themselves as handyman disciples. Murongyu thought that among those people, there must be people sent by the alchemist from the outer palace to cause trouble. Under normal circumstances, he would not pay attention to these people. However, now that they had voluntarily given him merit points, he would feel embarrassed if he did not accept it. Sorry, if you're a handyman disciple, 500,000 merit points are more than enough. But an outer palace disciple? At least 5 million merit points. Murongyu looked at the young man calmly. Hearing Murongyu's words, many handyman disciples outside the courtyard could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. But then, many people became angry. Someone from the outer palace was looking for Murongyu to refine a weapon. There were many weapon refinement masters in the outer palace, and there were even weapon refinement masters. Why did they come to the preparatory palace to look for Murongyu? They were definitely preparing to suppress Murongyu. Everyone was not stupid. After knowing the identity of that person, they immediately thought of the key point. The young man's expression suddenly changed, but he soon sneered. At the same time, his originally suppressed cultivation level was restored to its peak. Suddenly, an extremely vast aura burst out from his body like a vast ocean, rolling out in all directions like a tidal wave. Suddenly, the handyman disciples around the courtyard could not bear it and were constantly suppressed and forced to retreat. Only Murongyu, who was standing in front of the young man, maintained his original expression and stood motionless like a sacred mountain. Not to mention the peak of the undead stage. Even the aura of a peak profound sage would have no effect on Murongyu. 5 million per piece. If you want to continue, then put down the materials. Otherwise, leave immediately, Murongyu said indifferently. Murongyu, you're raising the price. Do you know the consequences of this? 6 million. Murongyu indifferently uttered these 3 words. You. The young man was speechless. Killing intent burst out from his body, and he looked as if he could not wait to kill Murong with a palm. But soon he calmed down, but his expression was terrifyingly cold. Good. 6 million merit points for a sacred weapon. It had to be 4,999 formations. At the same time, it must be refined according to our blueprint, and it must be completed within 10 days. If it exceeds the deadline, or does not comply with our requirements, then you will compensate according to the price. While speaking, the young man threw out a storage ring, and then his figure flashed and left the courtyard. 10 days later brings 60 million merit points for the transaction. Murongyu also said indifferently, and then quickly disappeared. After entering Hichu Luoshu, Murongyu immediately poured out the materials in the storage ring. Hichu, take a look at these materials. What's so special about them? There were no missing materials, but Murongyu did not believe that those people would just take out these ordinary materials for him to refine. Since they wanted to suppress him, there must be something wrong with these materials. Among the hundreds of materials, Murongyu did not recognize many of them. Sky River Cinnabar, Soul-Breaking Wood, Wishful Fortune Mud. When Hichu saw these materials, he called out their names one by one. However, every time he called out a name, his face became more dignified. These are not ordinary materials. If it were an ordinary undead master refiner, or even a grandmaster refiner, let alone refining a sacred weapon a day, they can't even refine one set of materials in a day. Hichu sneered, but you have the flame of primal chaos, so these materials are not a problem at all. Moreover, you have Hichu Luoshu to speed up. Chapter 1362. These were all high-grade materials that could even be used to refine top-grade sacred artifacts. However, These materials were not expensive. At most, they were worth a few 100,000 merit points. A few 100,000 merit points was nothing to the Outer Palace disciples, especially those highly regarded blacksmiths. They were only using these materials to make things difficult for Murong-Yu. 10 sacred artifacts, 60 million merit points. When would Murong-Yu pay them back? Moreover, merit points were only one aspect. The most important thing was to attack Murong-Yu's confidence and destroy the momentum that he had built up over the past few days. If he failed to refine 10 sacred artifacts in a row, who would dare to ask Murong-Yu to refine sacred artifacts in the future? If no one asked Murong-Yu to refine sacred artifacts, how would he pay back the 60 million merit points? In this way, they would have the means to control Murong-Yu. Every weapon refiner or alchemist would have their own unique flame. These flames were used to smelt and purify. The higher the level of the flame, the less time it took to smelt and purify. However, special materials like the Sky River Cinnabar could not be smelted by ordinary flames. Murong-Yu guessed that these materials could not be smelted by the famous alchemists of the Outer Palace. Even if they could smelt, it would be difficult to fuse them together to refine a sacred artifact. However, they did not know that Murong-Yu had the strongest flame in the world, the flame of primal chaos. Moreover, they did not take into account that Murong-Yu had a treasure that could speed up time, the Hichu Luo Shu. If he could not refine a sacred artifact in a day, what about 10 days? 100 days? Therefore, Murong-Yu did not hesitate to accept these materials. 6 million merit points and a mid-grade sacred artifact were given to senior brother Murong-Yu without hesitation. It seems that those people from the Outer Palace want to kill Murong-Yu. Since they dared to give Murong-Yu materials, they must be very confident. I wonder if Murong-Yu can refine it successfully? We'll find out soon. It's only 10 days. More and more people gathered outside Murong-Yu, waiting to see the result. In fact, other than the odd job disciples, even more Outer Palace disciples had arrived, including those powerful weapon refiners and alchemists. In 10 days, Murong-Yu will come out. If all of them failed, then if we want to find him to refine pills, I wonder if he would refuse. If it wasn't for the fact that he only accepted 10 missions at a time, I would have given these herbs to him long ago. What a pity for this genius. We must strangle him in the cradle of his growth, someone said indifferently. His voice was filled with dense, killing intent. Time flowed like water, and a day passed in the blink of an eye. It was already the first day of Murong-Yu's mission, but there was nothing unusual in the courtyard where Murong-Yu lived. Seeing this scene, some people heaved a sigh of relief, while others frowned. This was especially true for the odd job disciples. At this moment, they were all very unhappy. In the true martial temple, the odd job disciples and the Outer Palace disciples were simply from two different worlds. The Outer Palace disciples were always superior, and they looked down on the odd job disciples. Now that they were suppressing Murong-Yu, they were also suppressing them. They were all odd job disciples, and they were all a group. However, no matter how angry they were, they dared not speak out. Regardless of identity, status, or strength, they were far inferior to the Outer Palace disciples. If they offended the Outer Palace disciples, they would be expelled from the true martial temple at best, or they would lose their lives at worst. If the Outer Palace disciples wanted to kill them, it would be as easy as crushing an ant. A day has passed, and Murong-Yu still hasn't refined his saint weapon. There's still 9 days left. Let's see how he's going to refine 10 saint weapons. The young man who had handed over the refining materials to Murong-Yu laughed out loud at this moment. Suddenly, the odd job disciples around him glared at him angrily. The Outer Palace disciple scoffed, and an extremely powerful aura instantly burst out. All of a sudden, the odd job disciples around him were shaken, and their chi and blood surged like a raging river. They retreated continuously from a shock. The odd job disciples were even more furious, but they dared not say anything. After all, if that fellow were to make a move, he could easily severely injure them. As long as they were not killed on the spot, the true martial temple would not do anything to them. It's only the first day. There's still 9 days left. With senior brother Murong's strength, he'll definitely be able to refine those saint weapons, someone said in a deep voice. Hee, just wait and see, the young man sneered. He knew how monstrous those materials were, let alone 1 day. Even if Murong Yu had 10 days, he would not be able to refine a saint weapon. As expected, there was no sign of heaven and earth in Murong Yu's courtyard in the following days. Without any sign of heaven and earth, it meant that Murong Yu did not refine successfully. In the first few days, the odd job disciples still had a certain level of confidence in Murong Yu. However, as time passed, they lost more and more confidence. In fact, in the end, they'd already given up all hope on Murong Yu's behalf. It's been almost 10 days, and Murong Yu hasn't refined a single saint weapon? That's too embarrassing. He still calls himself a weapon-refining grandmaster. I don't think he's anything, right? I've already said that he doesn't have the ability to refine weapons. Those saint weapons from before were probably not refined by him. Waiting here is simply a waste of our time. That's too disappointing. From being full of confidence in the beginning to having a certain level of confidence, to being disappointed, and then to being in despair. In the end, many of the odd job disciples had already started cursing. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. However, they did not think about it. Even if Murong Yu did not refine successfully, what did it have to do with them? It's the 10th day. Murong Yu, get out here. On the 10th day, the young man who had previously asked Murong Yu to refine a saint weapon stepped from the sky and landed in Murong Yu's courtyard. He shouted towards the courtyard. Creak! Before his voice had even died down, Murong Yu's door opened. Then, Murong Yu slowly walked out. His hair was messy, his clothes were sloppy, his face was pale, his eyes were sunken, his face was full of stubble, and his eyes were lifeless. He looked dejected. Seeing Murong Yu in such a state, no one found it strange. This was because they all knew that Murong Yu could not refine a saint weapon in these few days. Murong Yu, the 10 days are up. Return my materials to me and give me 60 million merit points. The moment he saw Murong Yu, a cruel smile flashed across the young man's face. Murong Yu looked at the young man and shook his head. I don't have any materials. I don't have 60 million merit points. The young man laughed complacently and looked very happy. In that case, you can become my slave. Refine weapons and refine pills for me. When you return 60 million merit points, you can regain your freedom. As he spoke, a white light flashed in front of him. A contract written in black and white appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It seemed that he had already prepared it. How shameless. This bastard must have used some extremely difficult materials to refine for Murong Yu. Then, he will wait for Murong Yu to fail and control him. Once Murong Yu becomes his slave, he will be able to get a weapon refining and pill refining genius at his disposal. This is a sure-win deal. Using 60 million merit points was actually just a few 100,000 merit points in exchange for Murong Yu's life. What else could be more valuable than this price? Once Murong Yu signed a slave contract, it would be difficult for Murong Yu to make a comeback. It was basically impossible. Hearing this, Murong Yu raised his head and looked at the young man in astonishment. Then, a look of surprise and confusion appeared on his face. Why should I give you 60 million merit points? Why should I become your slave? Did you hit your head when you went out today? Weren't you the one who gave me 60 million merit points for 10 sacred weapons? Murong Yu looked at the young man as if he was looking at an idiot. The young man's face immediately darkened. Murong Yu, are you trying to deny it? You can't refine the sacred weapons I need in 10 days. Are you going to compensate me 60 million merit points? Of course, if you have them, you don't have to sign the contract. Murong Yu immediately laughed. When did I say that I didn't succeed? The young man's face was filled with surprise, but he soon sneered. You succeeded? You used my materials to refine the sacred weapons I need? Do you really think I'm a fool? The young man was very certain because there were no heaven and earth anomalies of successful weapon refining in the past 10 days. He felt that Murong Yu was just making a last-ditch effort. Murong Yu sneered and waved his hand. Suddenly, 10 sacred weapons of different shapes lined up in the void above their heads. Although each of the sacred weapons was different in shape, the light they emitted and the aura they gave off was similar. In other words, the power of these sacred weapons was about the same. 10 sacred weapons? The young man exclaimed when he saw the 10 sacred weapons. Then, he reached out his hand and grabbed the sacred weapons. Wait! Murong Yu coldly shouted as he blocked the youth's movements. The young man's face turned cold. Murong Yu said indifferently, 60 million merit points. As he spoke, he took back the 10 sacred weapons with a thought. The young man's face instantly darkened. How could he have 60 million merit points? These materials did not belong to him. They were given to him by the blacksmiths in the outer palace. They did not give him any merit points. After all, no one thought that Murong Yu could refine 10 sacred weapons in 10 days. What? No merit points? You want these sacred weapons? Give me 60 million merit points first, Murong Yu said indifferently. Murong Yu, you're too presumptuous. I have to check the goods first. Scram! Murong Yu abruptly shouted. This shout was so loud that it shocked the young man's soul. Suddenly, the young man's soul almost shattered. He took a few steps back with a pale face. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.